I think also guys think it has to be like an 18 gauge needle, which is like a horse needle, and it's massive, and it doesn't. And when you show what an insulin needle looks like, and then they actually try it, they're like, oh, this doesn't hurt. It's not so bad.
Well, how will that change if they're obese?
So they could use different lengths of it, and still it's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Even like sub-Q with an insulin needle, would that still be an option?
It is. But again, if they're obese, hey, let's push them to cream first.
Sure.
Then switch to injection. That would be my route. So, and that's what I encourage. We don't get a ton of obese guys that we coach, but if they are at that level, I'm like, hey, we can start with the cream. You don't have to worry about a needle.
Sure.
And guys who are afraid of needles, but.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk.
Hey guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, our guest is Gilbert, back for, I don't know how many times.
Third.
The third time. Tom with the assist again. And we're just going to jump right into this dick pic thing because we were talking about it beforehand and I don't understand all of it. So you're making boner talk common language, right?
Yes,
so
I normalize that.
I'm sure normalizing that's got to come with some consequences, right? So, I was speaking to somebody just yesterday. I'll keep unnamed and nobody will know because this podcast is going to post later. And the dick pic story is, I just don't get it. I don't get it. So
I want to understand the strategy behind that, because what we were saying offline is if there's any women out there who have gone out with or married a man due to his dick pic showmanship or whatever it is. presentation, please call me because I want to understand, what was it? What did it for you? What is it? Is it the art, the way that he displayed it, the video? Like, because I've gotten all those, and I more want to understand the psychology behind it. What is your strategy? What is your game plan with sending this?
Sure.
How would you like me to react?
That's where I'm a little lost as well, because I see only negative from this.
Yeah.
No positive.
Well, it's a big opening gambit, isn't it? Like, you've played your ace card. If that's your ace card, you played it. So where do you go next? Like, if she doesn't respond to that single picture, do you create a PowerPoint presentation after that to try and scale up how impressive it is? Like, where do you go?
I'm so confused, because if it's like giant, right? Then on the other end, there's offense just because it's there. Then how many are going to say, oh my God, that's great because it's 9 fucking feet long, right? Or it's a micro penis, right?
I've gotten that too.
And then you get the sympathy vote.
Yeah. And then just say it's average. I don't get it. I don't understand.
If you get a micro penis and it's clearly a micro penis, do you comment on that, or do you say like, oh, that's doable or tolerable? Like,
well, I mean, then
or what do I do with that? Like, I don't know what the response is.
And you don't know if it's actually that person's dick to begin with.
This is very true.
Because you're not seeing the whole thing. So they could just be sending somebody else's dick.
That's a low
But if you say this, then they'll send you an entire movie of the whole full body. We don't need more than we've already been sent. When I say we, I don't know if you guys have been sent these, but
no, I've never been sent.
I get sent them more for questions of, do you think I need TRT? And I'm like, how do you think I can tell that based off this presentation?
What do you think TRT is going to do in that scenario as well? Like, if you're not particularly blessed, like, 100 milligrams of testosterone is going to give you 2 inches? What are they hoping for?
Yeah.
What's the Hail Mary pass that
what
we're trying
to
play? What do
you actually
here?
want?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if I'm thinking about this critically, right? And because I could see that, not the dick pic part, but I could see they wondering if they need to be a TRT or not. And there's a lack of education. That if they think the penis size is going to be, because balls, right, will shrink if you're on a boatload of shit, how do we educate them to be able to know TRT is not going to increase your penis size?
What you could tell them is stop training your legs, especially your adductors. Take loads of stuff so that everything around it shrinks.
Yeah.
That relative proportion looks bigger.
Shave.
Even basic TRT can shrink the testicles. Not in everybody, but it can. And that's when I tell guys, I'm like, I wouldn't personally worry about that. It makes everything else look bigger.
There you go.
You know, and there's no women. The joke I run is there's no women on Tinder or dating apps who list like massive teabag as like a turn on. At least I wouldn't. Again, if there's any women out there where this is your thing, please call me.
Like if they're not hanging out your shorts, I'm not interested.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, would you want me to show you?
No, I do not want to see. You know, I'm just trying to critically think this through a little bit.
That would be a good reaction video, though.
Yeah, that would be great.
Like if my balls were just giant, then maybe I would wonder like how much they're going to shrink if I cared.
Yeah.
You know,
but I haven't gotten that question. It's more like, do you think I need TRT? And I'm like, based off your balls, based off your dick, like, what are we trying to show here?
Yeah.
Do you want validation over the size, the girth, the prettiness? I mean,
prettiness,
the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Should we call it the aesthetic?
All right. So outside of that whacked question, what would be the next question or the next image or photograph or inquiry of should I be on TRT?
I usually respond either with, I think you need a urologist. And then I'm like, well, I feel bad because I don't want to scare them. Have them.
Well, not from the penis side, just if they're sending you a message and they're inquiring if they should be on TRT, what would be the symptoms that they would be experiencing for them to want to ask that question?
So then I asked them, well, why are you asking me this? Are there symptoms that, coincide with that? And usually they're like, yeah, I feel like I can't think as clearly. I don't feel as energetic. I feel like my sex drive's really low. That's big for a lot of guys because they associate sex drive only with low testosterone. And usually it's an education route where I say, listen, sex drive is just part of it. And that's so multifactorial and there's so much that goes into it. Are you experiencing some of these other effects? What is your age, first of all? How old are you? How long have you felt like this? Are there any other stressful events happening in your life that can be contributing to you having this like anhedonic attitude toward life, or you just feel apathetic, or maybe depression? Because depression, low-level depression can coincide with hypothyroid, also low T. So talking them through that. And this is what really happens in the DMs, because a lot of guys are so overwhelmed by the info out there because they're like, I don't know if I have low T. And I'm like, have you even gotten labs done? And if they have, they've been told they're normal by some GP or somebody not qualified to do replacement therapy, or they still have all these symptoms. And then it's discussing them through that. And then the lifestyle stuff. So how's your diet? What do you do for training? Are you sleeping? All those things.
Sure.
So where would you say is the optimal range? Granted, it's going to change depending upon person, but if the prescription range has dropped, over the past decade, I believe that's what Serrano was telling me last time I saw him, is I don't know the numbers. I'm just going to throw shit out randomly. It used to be like 300. Now it's down to like 100.
It's like 160 to 180, I think, is the lowest.
Yeah, so it dropped down. So, and that would be why a lot of physicians would say, no, you don't need that because you're at 200 and the normal range is 160, but the normal range used to be 300. But, and I don't think that was any conspiracy theory. I think it's just a factor of more people. The demographic that they're basing that on are people that actually go to a physician to get the labs done.
Yep.
Right. So over a period of time, more and more people are going. So it's going to have a lower and lower number. So the average becomes lower and lower over a period of time because it's decreased. So where would be the optimal? Because you have what's considered normal, which has decreased in half, so because they could go get their labs done. Yeah. And then it will come back at 280, something like that. And they're going to be, oh, shit, this is way over what is normalized. But normal and optimal are different.
100%. And I know Merrick's range is 600 to 1400, which most GPs or regular doctors would be like, oh my gosh, that's way too high. But frankly, that's where our dads and grandfathers lived. So, and to your point, that arbitrary range does not take into account people who are actually on testosterone replacement too. So they use that range for guys who are both natural and on TRT. If you want to consider TRT not natty, that's a whole nother discussion. But I would say even guys who have been 600 and 700 still have symptoms. So maybe they need to live beyond 900 to 1,000, and that's okay. There are guys who are at 600, 700, they feel great. You know, their free T is high as well. And that's where the discussion of, well, if you feel these symptoms and you do present with low testosterone, what else is going on in your life, which is taking inventory of what their stress is and all of that stuff, because it always comes down to that. What is your body fat level? If you have high body fat, that's going to suppress your testosterone levels, because these guys think they should be living at the levels that are optimal, but everything else they're doing is not supporting that. Sure. So they think, well, if I inject and that brings my levels up, then I'm good. I don't really have to address the training and the nutrition and all that stuff. You actually have to get your body fat down. Body fat is a very inflammatory tissue. And so you are suppressing your natural testosterone levels by being unhealthy, being inflamed, insulin resistant, all those things. And now you want to add a hormone into an inflamed environment. Your body's not going to be like, oh, welcome. This is going to be a smooth experience. It's really not. So guys have to understand that they have to still do the work, because testosterone does take a long time to work, but you also have to do the work to support it working in you.
So in that kind of like chicken and egg scenario, how do you kind of decide if someone comes to you saying, I think I need TRT? How do you know, what kind of characteristics will you maybe look for to decide that this person genuinely needs TRT to maybe give them the impetus to do X, Y, and Z to make their life better? Or are they someone who can probably get away with just doing the lifestyle part of the equation, which will in turn probably get their T back? Because, you know, there's going to be a chicken and egg scenario there, whereas which one comes first, right?
Yeah. And there seems to be a divide in not only the fitness industry, but everywhere, where guys want to hold on to their nattiness for as long as possible. They want to exhaust everything natural, which absolutely you should. Rarely have I seen a guy with suboptimal testosterone levels get it to a point where it's optimal and it stays there through lifestyle alone. So I have had guys where they're maybe borderline low, they have the symptoms, but their life is a mess. Like they're not training consistently. Their diet sucks. Like they're not sleeping. All right, let's get this all together and then revisit in 6 months to a year and see where we are. And I've seen guys go up maybe 300-400 points by getting their lifestyle together, but they still don't feel great. Sure. They don't stay there. And so then it's actually better to add testosterone in the mix when they have everything else done, because they will feel a lot better on it. It'll work a lot better for them. But for those guys that you were saying chicken egg, who are very obese, who really lack, you know, the drive and the motivation, and they just don't feel good, that may be the thing that gets them off the couch, that gets them their drive back, that gets the motivation. And then we start to get the body fat off, and then we start to really dial in everything else. With the understanding that this may not feel so good at first, but this is the way we're going to go. And I learned from my friend Dave Lee, who said that cream for guys who are obese tends to be a better bridge to testosterone, because the cream is preferential to 5-alpha reductase pathway versus aromatase. So aromatase converts test to estrogen. 5-alpha converts it to DHT. So DHT will increase sex drive a lot more. A lot of guys who are very overweight have very low sex drive, but it does not give them the same, quote, side effects that guys on injections may experience, such as the water retention, the moon face, the mood swings, stuff like that. So it might be a better pathway for them to go down when they're very overweight. And then,
are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? You know, things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a table talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over-the-counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being.
When we get the body fat down, then if they want to change to injections, then absolutely. Or if they're happy on the cream, they can stay on the cream.
Sure. So since you mentioned the aromatase pathway there and estrogen, obviously a lot of these guys, when they're getting their blood works done, estrogen will be part of that. And, I'm sure you get a lot more of this than I do, but I have a lot of guys coming to me saying like, my estrogen is normal, or I have no estrogen related side effects at all, but I'm going to take DIM, or I'm going to take an anastrozole or Imidex just because it's maybe slightly high end of normal. So yeah. In that scenario, what should guys be concerned about estrogen? When should they be concerned about estrogen? And what are the ways that maybe we can manage it better than just trashing it with things like Arimidex?
Huge topic in the TRT space, highly debated all the time. And I will say, when somebody's on testosterone replacement, if they're managed properly and they're on a good protocol, they will not need an aromatase inhibitor. And that actually does come from the bro science bodybuilding world of estrogen's bad, we have to block it. It has a lot of good properties for guys. So number one, it is anti-inflammatory, just like cortisol, even though you don't want cortisol high all the time. So it does have anti-inflammatory properties. It is cardioprotective and it's neuroprotective. Similar to how women need testosterone, men do need estrogen. So the way that they measure it in blood is not reflective of what actually is in the tissue. So the way estrogen acts in men is as a paracrine hormone. So you're only going to see like a snippet on serum lab work that you would have normally in your body. So it's not reflective. So to assign it this other arbitrary range and say, well, it's bad if it gets over 50 or 40 on some labs. But why? Why is that bad? Show the literature, because all the studies that have been done on the benefits of TRT in men did not have aromatase inhibitors in those studies.
Sure.
There was no blocking of estrogen in all those studies. And that comes from Dr. Neil Rouzier, who has shown that if you block estrogen, it can be a massive detriment to guys. And if you've asked anybody who has done that or crushed their estrogen, they feel terrible. Their joints start to creak and feel achy. They may lose their libido. They may lose their erection. They become more insulin resistant. They may gain belly fat. A lot of the same things that happen to women in menopause. Bone density as well. I've seen DEXA scans of guys who have been on Arimidex for years and they're borderline osteoporosis. Wow. And that's a problem. So if it's managed properly, which a lot of places will do 1 shot a week, 1 shot every 2 weeks still, you're going to get a massive spike. And yeah, you're going to get a higher spike in estrogen. Whereas if you inject 2 to 3 times a week or more frequently, it's more aligned with your natural release pattern. And then that's not going to feel as up and down for guys. And then you're less likely to have these huge spikes on your blood work. But again, I know a lot of physicians that don't even test estrogen anymore because guys see that flagged as high and then they freak out.
So for those of us that maybe won't remember the exact numbers and stuff like that, would it be better to think of estrogen and testosterone rather than looking at just the individual number and the range, like the ratio between them? So like say my testosterone is very high end normal. should I expect my estrogen to also be higher than normal, for example?
You would expect estrogen to come up when test comes up, but I would not worry about the number at all. We have guys, none of our guys who are on TRT are on an AI. Anytime they get lab work, it's pretty much high. Estrogen is high. And it can be in the hundreds, it can be in the 90s, in the 60s. And they feel great. And there's no reason to go there with that because it can be so harmful to a man's health.
Sure.
And understanding how estrogen works in a man is crucial, which a lot of clinics and a lot of places don't. And they use it as part of their cookie cutter. Here you go. Here's your estradiol. Here's your Arimidex, your testosterone, and then HCG out the door protocol that everybody gets.
Sure. So for the minority, for maybe that it does become a problem, what are the kind of signs that they're looking for to actually know, okay, I'm not going to worry about it unless I see X, Y, and Z? And then what would be a better strategy maybe than just crashing it with Arimidex? So
a lot of guys who report, quote, estrogen side effects are really insulin resistance. So the itchy nipples, the sensitive nipples, especially at onset of TRT, that's a normal fluctuation of your body getting exogenous hormones and being like, yo, like, let me work this out. And they coincide that with, oh my gosh, my estrogen's too high. I'm going to get gyno. Something bad's going to happen. And they may be overweight. They may have high body fat. So back to adding an exogenous hormone to an inflamed body, let's work on the insulin resistance part of that. Let's get your body fat down and you're not going to experience that so much. And that's where using cream on guys who are higher body fat can help them not experience so many of those side effects because it's pushing more the 5-alpha reductase pathway versus the aromatase. And so they will say, well, my estrogen's high. I can feel it because I have the moodiness and the water retention and all of that. But it really is more insulin resistance showing up.
Sure. So for those who are maybe on the injections but maybe should be on the cream, would going to smaller daily injections have a similar effect? Obviously, the cream is very slow releasing, absorbing, etc. Would moving to slower releasing or daily smaller dosages have a similar effect, or is that still going to push you down the same pathway?
It can, but it's more if you're going from 1 shot a week to 2 or 3, that's going to be better. Sure. I would say like most men do best on 2 to 3 injections a week. If they like injecting every day, they can go every day, but it's more, what are they willing to do? Yeah.
Is it kind of diminishing returns after that point?
Yeah.
Once you get to
and it's also trial and error. So try it, see how you feel. If you don't, you can go back to 2 to 3 times a week. But very rarely does somebody feel good on once a week. Sure. There are guys that do. But more optimal would be 2 to 3 times. Sure. For sure.
You mentioned, kind of going back here a little bit, I'm sorry, about testosterone levels and mentioning like that our fathers and grandfathers lived at this range, right? So obviously we're only talking about kind of a generation of change in reality. So our genetics haven't changed in that time. So what do you think are the primary drivers in our society and our culture now that are causing that reduction? Because you mentioned in the previous podcast that obviously those guidelines for what is normality have come down, and you kind of explained why that could be in terms of we're just measuring it now. And most of the people who get measured probably already have low, so it's kind of a confirmation bias. But if genetics haven't really changed, why are we experiencing more and more men that need TRT? Or is it just a case of people no longer suffer in silence and there's just as many people with low T now as maybe there were 30 years ago? What do you think is kind of changing or not?
I think a big part of that is lifestyle. So you live in America now and you're probably the only one that has lost weight coming to America, where most Europeans or anybody coming across the pond does not experience that. But you have been exposed to the culture here before. You see how Americans live. The accessibility to convenience has made it much easier to just do nothing, press buttons from your couch, and everything gets delivered to you. Sure. So we don't have to be as active as we used to be. So if you combined the sedentary lifestyle with people now accepting being larger, having more body fat as a social norm, also combine that with, well, there's all these toxic chemicals in the environment and our food quality sucks now, and all of that together, like kids don't play outside anymore like when we were kids. They're playing video games. They're not hunting and gathering. Like their hunting and gathering occurs in a video game. So that is going to have a suppressive effect overall to men showing up with lower and lower T levels. If you're not active, if there's no reason to like exude your masculine traits by going out hunting, gathering, being masculine, like however that's
that
defined.
Toxic masculinity.
Yes, and it's so toxic, and now that's even like a cultural thing that's suppressing masculinity across Earth, which is part of my mission in life, to help men be able to operate the way they should, but function optimally as a man. So I think that all contributes to it.
Sure.
Are the lower testosterone rates that we're seeing global, or is it just specific to us?
They are global. The studies that they've done also with sperm production is a global epidemic. Obviously, it's going to be likely higher in more rural areas in other countries and stuff like that, because they don't have access to the conveniences.
I'm wondering, like, when you talk about the toxins, the UK bans more shitty crap than what we do. So you would expect, if that's the case, they would have higher average testosterone rates. If that's playing into that, I don't know if they do or they don't. That's why I asked, is it global? And there's some cultures to where they still, they don't have all the other shit. So you would expect that to still be higher if all those other factors were not involved.
I wonder if you see the same thing like Amish communities, for example, or something like that.
That would be a very good case, so I'd like to see the data, that cross references, those to be able to see, because it's the default answer for pretty much anything anymore is the sedentary lifestyle, the toxins. It doesn't matter what the symptom is. It just kind of like defaults to that. And my brain goes to what cultures don't have that, and do they still see these same things? And I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just kind of throwing that out.
Like when we had Dan DeBrock on, he was saying about the differences in like obesity rates between cultures like the Amish communities and ours and stuff like that. And obviously it all becomes interlinked, doesn't it? So I suppose it comes down to how much of the TRT problem, epidemic, whatever, is down to us just getting away from our basic human requirements. That is, we're bipedal, we're meant to walk around and move stuff. We're not really meant to eat a lot of these processed foods and so on and so forth. We're meant to get enough sun, and we don't, vast majority of us. So, how much of it do you think, if you could click your fingers right now and everyone started getting 10,000 steps a day, X amount of hours of sunlight, so on and so forth, how much of this do you think would probably dissipate over the next couple of years? I know that's a very abstract, difficult question probably to answer. But
it's really difficult. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I think we would see a significant shift. But I mean, think about like even just 10 years ago, if someone said, I'm tracking my steps, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, why? And now it's like, I got to go get steps. I got to make sure I'm only at 6,000. Like, where was that shift in our society where all of a sudden we're cognizant of how much we've actually moved per normal? And funny thing is, we'll get our coaching clients who are like, well, when I go to work, I get 12 to 15,000 steps. So I'm already getting my cardio in. And I'm like, let me rephrase that, or let me reposition that for you. Different perspective. Is that just what we're supposed to do? And anything on top of that would be considered cardio or considered actual work, because that's what we're supposed to be. That's how we're supposed to live. Think about why gyms were created. Obviously, you can build more muscle mass than your typical caveman, but it's literally like recreating what our ancestors did, like when they're hunting, picking things up, moving them far, like stuff like that. So is that how we're actually supposed to be operating? I wouldn't consider that, oh, you're good, you're getting in the amount of movement. I think people underestimate how much it actually takes. They think, oh, my hour twice a week, that's my exercise, and I walk like 4,000 steps every other day. That's not enough to move the dial toward health, let alone changing body composition. Like, we're literally supposed to be operating and walking around all day, like you said. So I think that if people were more active and paid more attention to what goes in their body, and it's this, beating this message across, it's so boring, it's so annoying, but it works. Because I've seen people's labs change for the better when they literally just implement the diet and exercise strategies that they should be doing as optimal humans.
Sure.
We've just gotten so far away from that because we're blind to it. Like we see cereal commercials, we see crap commercials for all this food. You know, I love Oreos. I see a different Oreo like every week advertised now. And I'm like, but this is okay. Yeah. And you see how much of being a fit person now is an outlier in America. Like, and I've said this many times, I go to Disney World or you go through an airport or any big crowded place that is not a gym, you're one of the minority looking the way you do.
Sure.
And I think we're starting to come back to that as this is a form of a respectful look, because you see that in high level CEOs now. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg, if you look at Jeff Bezos and what he used to look like, Ari Emanuel, a lot of these guys now, their biggest flex is having a six pack. They realize that when they step foot in a boardroom, if they can't see their feet because of their stomachs in the way, that's a problem. So they want to command respect just by stepping in a room, by having that V-taper and having that look of, I take care of myself. I take my health seriously. I have the discipline and the work ethic to show up as the highest performing human. You want to do business with me.
Sure.
Or you want to be associated with that person.
So in that regard, do you think the whole body positivity type mentality is just doing more harm than good? Because, you know, if you go to countries like, I was speaking to Ilya, you know, if you're looking at places like Cyprus or Russia and maybe Eastern Europe, it's not really socially acceptable to be overweight there. Like you would get comments from your family and your friends and stuff like that. If you thought about losing weight and stuff, which maybe over here would be, you know, socially not acceptable.
Yeah.
And you see considerably lower rates of obesity in those countries because it isn't just okay, you know, people see it as an issue, whether it's, you know, for whatever reason. So do you think in that regard we have pushed the needle too far with, we don't want people to be so ashamed of being obese that they feel like they can't do anything about it and they don't want to go out in public, but if too much acceptance creates, you know, too much comfort and then we end up doing nothing about it?
That's a big topic. And there's a lot to unpack with that socially and everything. And it can draw a lot of trolls because, you know, people get very angry on the internet these days. I see it as like, can you have health at a bigger size? I think so, yes. But I think that there is a point where that has to be unhealthy. And granted, we're not seeing these people's lab work. We don't know anything about their lifestyle. We're just seeing what do they look like? What do they present to the world? Because if you say somebody should be jacked, that can mean 10 different things to somebody. A 2-pack, 12-pack, veins on the abs. We all know there's different definitions. Like we have clients that say, I want to be shredded and jacked. What does that mean to you? Can you send me a photo? Because there's bodybuilder and then there's like Ryan Reynolds and both can be described as jacked and shredded. So having one look, I think is a way to categorize like the fit world as wrong in the sense that there is a look to being fit when you fill out your clothes, when you look like you take care of yourself, whether that's jacked or shredded, whatever. Same with being overweight or bigger. I think there's carrying a little bit excess, and maybe that's due to somebody was sick, or if a woman just had a baby, or if a man went through some sort of trauma or something. But then there's excessive and obesity. And we know we can't go by BMI or any of that because we're all obese according to that. But from a health perspective, what is this excess tissue that is known to be inflammatory doing to your health? And what are you doing about it, if anything? And is this a role model for your children? Is this a role model for people that you're around and that you work with? Do you care about your health? Or is this something that you're ignoring and you're just saying, no, I'm fine. It's okay to be happy where you are, but also is your happiness in the state of being still having collateral damage to the people around you, mainly children and stuff like that? Because I personally used to get very angry at Disney World, where I would see entire families who were very obese. The kids are helpless in that situation because the parents obviously are the ones, the role model, the enabler. And they're going to grow up traumatized, bullied, because kids still get bullied for how they look and how much they weigh. Are you setting the standard that you want your kids to live up to? So those are things to think about, where it's more a conversation of those things versus like, can you have health at X size? Like, yes, somebody can be healthy.
But could you make the argument that they could just be healthier at a lower weight.
I do.
But you don't know until they do that, right?
Right.
But I think, in other scenarios, we've managed to accept that you being healthy, you being happy with something and it being healthy are two very separate things. Like, for example, people who smoke can accept that it's not a good habit. Like, maybe they don't want to smoke in front of their kids because they understand that is a bad habit and it's unhealthy, but they want to be a smoker. But when it comes to food and diet and obesity, we haven't been able to separate those two things yet. Like, it's okay to be like that, but also accept that it's not healthy and it has repercussions. It seems like those two are still emotionally tied together, and we haven't been able to separate like we have with alcohol or smoking or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll ever get to that point, or do you think because it's kind of food related and food tends to carry emotional support and stuff like that for people, that they're always just going to be intrinsically tied and we're kind of going to be stuck with
Have
that
you seen
scenario?
how angry people get on the internet about nutrition?
Oh God, yeah.
Like you're quicker to change somebody's religion than you are their perception about food. Anytime I have a food related post, it's like utter chaos. And I've talked about diet soda, and it's like this world argues, and then these people are like, "Thank you," because there are people in the fitness industry that are purists, and everything that they eat and drink is like, massaged or comes from a spring in like Poland or whatever. That's fine. But I like to present more as a realist. Like, I drink energy drinks. And I literally had a client say to me, he's like, your content and your team, I am drawn to you guys because you're real. You show that you guys eat Sour Patch Kids on occasion, you drink energy drinks, you drink or you eat protein bars and stuff. And it's not just whole food all the time, because as a busy dad, as a busy business person, if I'm telling this guy that you have to have 6 whole food meals and carry them with you all day long to your kids' sports games, to your meetings, all that stuff, he's not going to last as a client because he's not going to learn how to have a quick protein shake on the go, which is fine. Yes, a lot of them have chemicals in them, but what is the bigger rock here? So if we're focused on getting protein, let's get protein through core power versus binging on something else or just going without anything. So I don't know what tangent I went off on going on about this, but I think it's the education surrounding food. And people are very tied to rules. Like, they want to be told what to do, what not to do. And that's why a lot of diets that have names do very well, because it comes with their list of rules. Well, what happens when you can't adhere to said rules? You feel like a failure. You set somebody up for not achieving success. How about we mesh this to your lifestyle? If you have to have 6 protein shakes because you're at your kid's soccer tournament in the middle of nowhere, that's okay. And you're not going to be, scolded for that. But yes, get your real food meals in too. But it's okay to have shakes. I literally have seen guys, they've said, my coach told me I can't have protein shakes ever. I'm not allowed to have Greek yogurt. And I'm like, why? And it's mostly former bodybuilders or bodybuilders trying to get this person to live like them. I would never push my lifestyle on somebody. I just show people, hey, I drink energy drinks. And when I go out, I drink diet soda. And people are like, that's going to kill you. Is it really? If I have one Diet Pepsi, is that really going to kill me while you're drinking alcohol, which is a proven toxin?
If that's what's going to kill you, you're probably also quite happy to fall on that side, I'd imagine. Like, if that's how I go, that's how I go at the end of the day.
Talk to Dr. Serrano. You can ask him about my blood work, and he disagrees with half of the things that I do from a dietary perspective, but for me it works, and I'm happy. I like my cinnamon roll, protein snacks. I'm not going to give those up until it shows that it's causing me harm, or I can't look the way I do. Then maybe I'll shift perspective. I've been there. I've done the 6 meals a day and eaten out of Tupperware and done all that. I don't need to do that. I've shown that.
I think what happens is, because there's a lot to unpack, right? in what you just said. So and some of my thoughts would be, most of the conversations that people get attracted to are conversations that happen in the margins, right? So when you're speaking, like, we should be able to speak about obesity across the board, right? But that obesity conversation then gets dwindled down into some body positivity because somebody within that community took offense because you were speaking about a broad-based demographic. For example, we can say, and we've all heard, powerlifters are fat. Fat powerlifters, right? There's 2 weight classes that might actually define that out of 13, right? But so you make this broad stroke, which could be very true, about whatever that demographic is, but what doesn't happen in the powerlifting community is you don't see the fat powerlifters raising all kinds of shit saying, why does everybody say all powerlifters are fat?
Yep.
Then you don't see the lean ones saying this is bullshit. You know, I'm not fat, nor are 90% of the people that compete.
Yeah.
But the conversation should be able to happen, because when you make that assumption that powerlifters are fat, then you look across the board and you're like, you know, you all kind of eat like shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So even the broad stroke to the people that don't fit in that one bucket still can help all them.
Sure.
But if they immediately turn off and say, screw these people that are saying powerlifters are fat, they're all full of bullshit. The only reason they're saying it is to garner attention because it's a talking point.
Yeah.
Right. So what becomes problematic is when you can't speak about the problem of obesity and what happens because of that. And then that gets shut down because somebody got offended, you know, because of all that. That's, I don't know how to kind of walk that line. But when you unpack even further and you look at, say, the parents with the kids, right? Would the parents love their kids? I mean, to sit there and for us to think that parents don't love their kids is a misnomer.
Yeah.
There's no way that they would give their kids just a tiny little bit of rat poison every single day, right? Because they understand this will kill my kid. But yet they are giving them, you know, sugar and other type of poisons every single day.
Sure.
They wouldn't do that if they knew. You know, if they really knew that, because they're not doing it with rat poison, they're not doing it with chemicals that they're in the garage that they're not putting in the kitchen, you know, and stuff like that. So their intent is good, but their education is not. You know, and when the education is being presented in headlines, it's always this shit on the margins.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Instead of just the basic stuff, which that's probably, if I'm to unpack it all, the biggest problem is the basic stuff doesn't garner headlines.
No,
it doesn't garner clicks. It doesn't garner attention. And with that being said, those people that are garnering the attention and all that, once they get the attention, then the basic stuff should be presented. That's where I see the biggest problem with the industry across the board is, okay, now you got them in a fucked up way, but I get it. You got them.
Yeah.
Now have the real conversation. You know, it's not about the diet soda. It's about all the other shit. But because I got you, you know, with the diet soda,
now you'll listen.
Yeah.
Check out all this other stuff. Yeah. That doesn't happen. It just seems like the people that garner all the attention on the margins, and I'm making a broad assumption, which I shouldn't do, they never do that. It's just like, here's this, what I call it, not white space, but margin. Here's this marginal topic. And then here's this marginal topic. Then here's this marginal topic. And they don't know. No. You know, they don't know. Yeah. They were probably raised the same way that they're raising their kids. They're eating cereal for dinner. So are the kids. They don't know it's vitamin fortified, right? You know, so there's that shit too. There's the advertising and the marketing. Yeah. And it's gotten better, you know, over the years, without a doubt, you know, and obesity rates are kind of hard to track, you know, because COVID kind of threw everything out of whack. So you almost need to track from post-COVID. You know, on through and see if because I believe it was lowering prior to COVID, you know, then, you know, the spikes up for obvious reasons, but I don't know, what are we, 4 years away now? 2021. So I'd be interested to see what the data is there, but for health, I mean, for anybody that's listening, they train, so they're having conversations with other people.
Yep.
Use those opportunities, you know, for the soda's a big one because it comes and goes. The diet soda's a big one. There's other ones that kind of come and go. Use those opportunities to be able to educate, and don't be such a dick about it.
Yes.
Because they'll say, no, the diet soda, you can drink as many as you want. You can drink 50 a day because this is what was done in rats. So we all know the fucking spiel, right? You know, that's what it is. Just, I wouldn't even have that conversation. I would just say, you know, it's okay in moderation, but what would probably help better, you know, would be to, you know, start getting some of that main big crap out of your diet.
Yes.
You know, or
the big rocks.
Keep drinking, you know, 20 diet sodas a day, but, you know,
the
drink them while you're outside walking.
Yeah.
You know, tie some kind of anchor it in some way, but that doesn't happen even at kitchen tables or dinner tables or whatever it's going to be. It's just going to be this argument about fucking diet soda, which is so irrelevant to the main thing that's going
issue.
on. You know, as they're eating, you know, fucking chicken fried steak or whatever it's going to be. And
it's providing an alternative. If you're drinking real soda, maybe we go to diet and then we start involving electrolytes in water and make steps toward that. So I gave up soda in 7th grade. I'm really weird. And all my friends thought I was really weird. And I don't know what rabbit hole I went down, but I remember being in the lunchroom and they're drinking like the full sugar Snapples and all the drinks that were popular then. And I'm like, that's bad for you. That's bad for you. Clearly the wrong way to go about it. But I'm 12. So I'm like, this is bad for you. You guys shouldn't drink that stuff. And I'm like, who am I? Like looking
Born
back
to be
on
an
that.
influencer, apparently.
Yeah, I've seen my calling, but I totally agree with you where it is an education thing. And that's why it upsets me, because it's like, where did this all go wrong? And it comes to that blindness of being exposed to back when we were kids with all the cereals and Kellogg's and like, this is what you have to have for breakfast. So we've been conditioned to have cereal for breakfast. I remember having Eggo waffles and like Pillsbury and all of that, because those were breakfast foods. So now, hey, let's shift it. You could eat whatever you want for breakfast. You could have steak, you could have, you know, ground turkey. Like you could literally have whatever you want to eat that first meal. And let's look at like what the protein options are. And I have to, if I had to simplify it to anybody, I'd say the best thing you can do is focus on how much protein you're getting, because that's going to carry you very far, because it does so many, it's like the magic macro. Not only does overeating it not really get stored as body fat, it's like zero chance. It makes you full, less likely to binge, helps you with muscle, helps you with energy if you're not getting enough. Like there's so many benefits. If it's overwhelming to focus on carbs, fats, and protein, let's just focus on protein. Let's make sure we get that in every meal. Let's get our kids eating protein and into protein, and let's have them see dad eating protein at meals and dad going into the gym and being active, and take your kids for walks while you're drinking diet soda, like something like that.
With that demographic, I mean, I guess I can pose the question to both of you, is this is foreign. All of this is foreign to them, right? It'd be like somebody speaking to me about physics, right? I get like this much of it, then it's just, I'm fucking lost, right? And so that's kind of where they are with this. If they had to choose between the nutrition or the exercise part, which should they choose? Because if I'm having a conversation with a family member that's in that realm, I'm going nutrition first, right? Because it's going to have the fastest impact, you know, the calorie control, protein and stuff like that, instead of the exercise first. Again, what I think happens, because I'm looking at the demographic of people that already do all this. And then people are asking them, do you train? And you know how the conversation kind of spins. And then they're saying you need 5 meals a day. You need, 1 gram of protein per, and it's just like, oh, fuck, where if they just start cleaning the diet up. And there's another camp that would say, just fucking keep doing all that, but just start exercising, right? They both, you should do both, right? Yeah. But we're talking about a demographic that's unlikely to do either.
Yeah.
Right. So with the nutrition part, you kind of touched on it where, focus on the protein, but keep in mind, a lot of these people don't even know what protein is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's that first. I mean, there's the internet. I mean, some of it I roll my eyes with. It's not that hard, but there's still a vast majority of people that don't really use the internet too. Yeah. So we got to remember all of that, where I'm going to go off on a tangent where, people are all concerned about AI, but they seem to forget that probably half the people don't even use Google now. They don't even use internet search. So yes, it's going to change everything. But for most people who are just going about their day to day working wherever they work, they're not going to be using Chat GPT.
No.
So the same thing kind of falls in this realm. They don't know with that, to where the protein almost may be too big of an ask, where finding a way to cut the calories would be a little bit easier, for them, or segment the meals, skip a meal, whatever they got to be able to do with that. So on the nutrition side, how would you answer what I asked, the exercise and the nutrition?
Personally, I would again go down the nutrition route, just because at some point, if you get that dialed in, at some point, usually some people will fall into a version of exercise that they actually enjoy. You know, whether it's walking or hiking or tennis or whatever, at some point, most people at some point will be like, oh, okay, this is pretty fun. I can do it socially or whatever. But no one enjoys giving up pizza, because it's literally created to make it hyper palatable. Like, so nutrition would always be the first one for me, and it's the one that's going to have the most ramifications long term. You know, some people get decent amount of physical activity just with their job, whereas very few people get given a good diet with their job. So there's more people that are probably struggling nutrition wise than steps and activity. And I think for most people, because I totally agree with what you said about focusing on the margins, it really makes no sense in truth, because we have more access to information than ever. We have more readily acceptable gym access at cheap prices in a lot of cases as well. Like, you take the piss out of Planet Fitness or whatever all you want, but if it means people can afford a gym, who cares, right? You know, so in theory, there's no reason for us to be in this scenario, you know. But I think nutrition is going to have the biggest impact on their well-being and their feeling and their long-term health day to day. And it is just the hardest one to ingrain, because we're bombarded with bad food, inverted commas, whether it's advertising on TV or whatever you're watching, whether you go in the store, if you go in the store, how much of it would you class as processed or not great food, you know, like, and even on your way to the checkout, what do they line the queues with on the way to, and there's a reason they do that, right? Because you're stuck there and you're looking at it all like, oh, okay, that looks good. So building nutrition habits for me would be first, just because there's more working against the average person with nutrition, in my opinion. Like, you're just constantly fueled by advertising and stuff that's trying to push you the wrong way. And I think the problem with all of the arguments happening in the margins is that people really overestimate how much it takes and how complicated it needs to be. You know, all this argument about aspartame and diet soda and energy drinks and stuff, people really need to think that to just be in decent health, they need to worry about those 100,000 different things, when in reality, it's going to be drink enough water, eat mainly dead animals and things that grow out the ground that are cooked in reasonably healthy way. You know, if you deep fry enough Brussels sprouts or whatever, it's not good for you, right? And that's going to be 80 to 90% of the battle for the majority of people. And for most people, that's going to get 80 to 90% of the long-term health benefits is just stuff that grew out the ground in animals. If you focus on eating that stuff 80, 90% of the time, sure, have your ice cream on your Friday night with your kids or whatever. Like, it's not, because, you know, we'd say at home, like in the UK, people might want to start losing weight. So they'll be like, oh, I'm cutting the sugar out of my tea. They might put 2 teaspoons of sugar in their tea and have 3 cups a day. And it's like, that's not your problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, if that's what you enjoy, if your energy drink is what you enjoy, that's not what's doing the damage. You know, it's the pizza and the processed food and the general overeating. And like Ali said, if you start focusing on just the basic food groups and the single ingredient foods, most of the calorie content, the micronutrients and the vitamins will tend to take care of themselves. And then you don't have to be a monk. You know, we're not here to step on IFBB stages here. You know what I mean? We're not trying to get to 4% body fat. Like, no one should be saying that the average person who just wants to be healthy cannot have a pizza or a tub of Ben & Jerry's every now and then. Like, you cannot expect that from people. Why should we do that? Like Ali said, she can look the way that she looks. She's in great shape whilst having her energy drinks and her protein treats. And so, because 80 to 90% of the time you're doing all the right things. And funny enough, that's generally what your body's going to reflect. And it doesn't, now it's not that complicated. It's reasonably simple. Now, simple and hard are different things. I'm not saying it's not going to be difficult to implement those things, but it doesn't require this broad rule book that you cannot eat this, you cannot have this, you must eat three portions of this every day and have 4 different colors of vegetables. Like, it really doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's a big misconception. We get the same with training as well. Like, oh, well, I can't afford to be in the gym 4 hours a week. Well, who said you had to? You know, and I think there's an even bigger misconception with nutrition, that it requires this huge effort, that all these things have to change, when in reality, just a couple of simple changes are probably enough to get people back under that, you know, maintenance level of calories where they would probably be absolutely fine for the most part.
I don't think with that huge effort that you're talking about, because I've spoke with a lot of top competitive bodybuilders, and so there's what they think they need to do, and they don't understand. Even they struggle with the discipline to be able to do what they do. Now they do it right because they want the outcome, but it's not easy in any way whatsoever, right? And they're going to slip up and screw up as well, part of the process. But that to think that is what it needs to be, and I think that's what a lot of people think, is this is what it needs to be, you know, perfect diet, you know, 4 training sessions per week, cardio every day, walking, all, and they're like, oh God, and you're like, even the people that do that
don't enjoy it.
It's not their favorite thing. They don't like it.
No bodybuilder is going to finish a prep and be like, man, I really miss eating egg whites and low salt ketchup every day for breakfast. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, they do it and they suffer and they do it for a purpose. But, you know, and again, that's maybe where like social media and stuff like comes in, because you always see the extremes. Like, you will see the bodybuilder eating nothing but chicken and rice to step on the stage, or you'll see the 400-pound guy eating 2XL. But we don't shine the light on the middle ground, who, for all intents and purposes, are perfectly healthy.
I think the key word you just said is purpose, right? Because say the bodybuilder has that purpose. Here's that show, and it's a very, very defined purpose, where you know, others want to get healthy. What is that? You know, what kind of anchored purpose is that? You know, because it's not defined hard enough for them to really want that. And I could generalize it even more. I'd like to be able to live longer for my kids. Okay, so what's the carrot here? I'd say, well, for a start, like, for me, being healthy probably also means not being great at anything. You know, if you want to be elite at anything, you're probably not going to be as healthy as you could be, because that's the very nature of it, right? But for me, it would be, if you had to kind of define health, it would be, you know, let's take average person in like their mid-20s. What are their physical capacities at that point in terms of just their standard adult muscle mass, their aerobic fitness, their mobility, and then your goal is to keep that level or decrease at the rate at which it decreases through age as much as humanly possible. That would be my definition, because chances are, if you're keeping your aerobic fitness base, you're maintaining your muscle mass, you're still mobile, and your body fat isn't outside of a healthy range, chances are all your blood work and your markers are probably going to be in a pretty good place. So for me, that would be it. Like, are my physical capacities decreasing in a substantial way, or quicker than maybe I should expect them to as I'm aging? And if they're not, chances are you're doing a lot of things right. Yeah. I would say that would even pertain to the serious athletes as well. Yeah. When you're talking about, you know, the 20 age, whatever it's going to be, because we're not saying that you need to increase those physical capacities, but I've said this before, that, you know, across the strength sport realm, you know, the training's all dialed in, but a lot of them pretty much just live a gen pop lifestyle. Right, to where that lifestyle will change as they get older and older, and the physical capacities will diminish and diminish. But if they just maintained what they had, you know, when they're in their 20s, then they don't have to worry about getting it back. Yeah, and we're not talking about elite levels of mobility or flexibility or cardiovascular fitness or whatever it's going to be. And it's not, especially for the athlete side, it's not that hard, you know, to be able to maintain. I mean, it requires a lot less work than building it in the first place, right? Or so getting it back. So if you're able to do that, then maintain it, you know, and sometimes that's why sometimes the best people to listen to in that regard are the athletes who are still doing it. And those, like you had David Ricks on, for example, or like look at someone like Mark Felix, who competed at World's Strongest Man into his late 40s and early 50s. Like, what are they doing? Because, you know, anyone can probably abuse drugs. I say anyone. There's still going to be genetic outliers, but people can abuse drugs and spike for a couple of years and then disappear. We see it all the time. But the people who do it for decades successfully, you know, there's got to be this bedrock of really sound habits and lifestyle choices that probably all of us can learn from. And if they're doing it into their 50s and 60s, chances are they're not eating like a prepping bodybuilder. You know, they've got a lifestyle that is sustainable, is not mind numbing, but also brings those outcomes
over that kind of time period, which is why sometimes I think those maybe are the best role models for maybe the Gen Pop, because although they might be performing at a high level, the stuff they're doing day in, day out is obviously incredibly successful, but also sustainable.
The interesting part about that is when I think about the strength athletes and the ones that have to eat in excess, you know, because they're gaining weight, and a lot of them will just, they'll eat like shit, but they do make sure the protein is where the protein needs to be. You know, so that's the block, you know, as you were talking about, even with the ones that are eating 6, 7, 8,000 calories a day, you know, where you ask how much protein, because sometimes they'll just say, I don't worry about it, I just eat like shit. But then you dig into it, like, so where's your protein at? Oh, shit, I never let it go under 250 to 300 grams. Like, oh, okay, so there is some.
Yeah, you do track it.
Yeah, I mean, so you are counting the fried chicken breasts or whatever the shit it is, you're counting the protein to be able to have that in there, which creates, you know, it makes it a little bit harder if they're really driving that up to get the calories that they need, but they don't need 900 grams of protein either.
Sure. And I think that's why focusing on the protein, like you said, is important as well, because it will be the one that people instinctively undereat, and is the one that is the most difficult to get. Do you know what I mean? Like if your carbs and fat are low at the end of the day, like, oh no, you can eat 2 Oreos and then be fine. Horrible, right? But if you get to the end of the day and you're 50 grams short on protein, you're going to sit there and grill a chicken breast at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like, so carbs and fat are so easy to overeat as well. Whereas like how many of us have gotten fat eating chicken breast and rib meat and whatever? Like,
I mean, protein today though is so accessible.
Yes.
You know, in drinks and bars. I mean, there's anywhere you go, you can go to any convenience mart and find a protein bar. I mean, it's not the greatest, right? No. But just through that crap, you could accumulate 50 grams of protein real easy.
Like you mentioned the core power ones, like we've been doing quite a lot of driving recently, and like they're like 40 grams of protein and lactose free.
Yeah.
Like
you can get them in gas stations.
Yeah, and they're like in pretty much every gas station, and barely, you know, the carbs and fat are pretty like there. Again, it's the same with the information. Like all of that stuff is readily accessible now, more than it's ever been. The problem is that those protein shakes are taking up one little shelf on a fridge that's full of everything else. That's the problem. It's not that it's not there, it's that it's hidden amongst the 95%.
Remember, it used to be the gas station snack of choice was beef jerky.
Yes.
That was the only thing they had. And now they have, I've seen 4 different protein shakes. Like I've seen the Jocko, I've seen the Core Power, I've seen Lean Body and Muscle Milk. And I'm like, all right, gas station. And the legendary cinnamon rolls that I like I'm like, all right, like you could actually put a meal together at a gas station now.
Very easy.
You don't have to bring it with you.
I mean, one drink in one bar, you got 60 grams of protein.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people, that's a third of the protein that they're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that does make you wonder, like for those who are maybe stuck at that roadblock where they think they can't eat enough protein or they struggle to make changes, I wonder how much of it is just an observation issue, in that they just haven't looked to see how accessible these things actually are now. Because, you know, if you don't look for them, you don't see them. Like, I don't drink alcohol, so I couldn't tell you what brands of beer in every gas station.
Yeah.
I just don't look.
Right.
So by the same token, if I'm someone who's not nutrition minded or fitness minded, I don't know those protein shakes, especially when they're taking up that one little shelf. But I do wonder if how many of those people that are stuck at that crossroads thinking they can't make that step, if they just spent a week looking around the grocery store, looking around the gas station and seeing all those easier options now, how many of them would start to think, okay, maybe this is doable. You know, maybe this isn't as hard as I'm making it out to be, which is usually the case, right? Like we usually overemphasize or overestimate how difficult something's going to be in our head. And then 9 times out of 10, you actually do the thing and you're like, oh, why did I big this up so much, right? And I just wonder if people spent just a touch more time looking at the options, whether they think, okay, I can do this, you know.
Well, I know the answer to this one, but I want to circle back to the optimal delivery methods of the TRT. And one thing that I get asked frequently is you know, more frequently to be able to keep the levels higher. Why not orals?
So the oral ones, the pills recently have started to become more popular, but not a lot of doctors know about them. So there's a pharmaceutical company that actually approached me about sponsoring Silverback because they were starting to push their oral pills. And I said, listen, a lot of the physicians I work with, they're not going to speak favorably on it because it's just not something that they promote. I don't know when and if that will be a delivery method that people see as an optimal one. But right now, with the injections and creams being the most popular, I think that's the route that a lot of them are going to go, because I think even though they say it bypasses the liver and all that, I don't know for sure. And I personally don't know enough on the research about it to speak further on its efficacy. Just that the physicians that I surround myself with are not for it.
I'd be surprised if, we're seeing things like BPC and peptides and stuff come in like nasal spray and oral sprays now. I'd be surprised if we don't see that within the next maybe 5 years.
Nasal spray, testosterone.
So like, if you have that option as a nasal spray, why would you take a pill? Like I assume the outcome is I want to avoid a needle most of the time. So if the nasal spray is already an option, I don't really understand what gap the pill is filling.
Well, the pill has been the default for anything that's wrong.
Yeah, but when years. I mean, they'll say it bypasses the liver, but no oral medication that has to go through the liver once or twice is going to have no effect.
Yeah.
So I don't. If you don't have to do that, I don't understand why you then would. If that's all I can think of.
People are quick to inject GLP-1s, but not testosterone.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think
what's the frequency of the dosing though?
It's once a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also guys think it has to be like an 18 gauge needle, which is like a horse needle, and it's massive, and it doesn't. And when you show what an insulin needle looks like, and then they actually try it, they're like, oh, this doesn't hurt. It's not so bad.
Well, how will that change if they're obese?
So they could use different lengths of it and still it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even like sub-Q with an insulin needle, would that still be an option?
It is. But again, if they're obese, hey, let's push them to cream first.
Sure.
Then switch to injection. That would be my route. So, and that's what I encourage. We don't get a ton of obese guys that we coach, but if they are at that level, I'm like, hey, we can start with the cream. You don't have to worry about a needle.
Sure. And
guys who are afraid of needles, but I think it's more of a getting used to, or just the unknown, or also the stigma attached to you're putting something in you with the needle, and that's steroids. So.
Yeah, of course. With TRT treatments, how do you see the role of things like CJC and ipamorelin and stuff like that? Because obviously they're being used quite widely now. And I don't know about you personally, but a lot of the guys that I coach that are on TRT, they're being offered them. But it seems like a lot of the time the physicians can't really even explain what they do. They're just like, oh, you should be on this as well. It's like, well, why? I feel fine. The TRT is working, but I'm being told I need or should do this. So, where is there a point where someone is on just TRT, and then there's something that you look for that you think they need something else, whether it's HCG or ipamorelin or CJC or whatever? Is there like signs or something that maybe you use it so that they don't need as much of a dose, or how do you see them playing a role basically?
The way that a lot of places would look at that is the IGF-1 level, and if that's low. So if a guy's not on TRT and he has low IGF-1 and he goes on TRT, that will help replete some of it. Also, lifting weights helps with that. It's very difficult to measure growth hormone. Also, growth hormone's expensive. Like legal growth hormone is very expensive. I've seen between $2,500 upwards of $6,000 a month for the real thing. And it's a fair line between the dosage too, because guys like it for the recovery aspect and the longevity aspect. But if you are obese or you're a little bit heavier than you should be and you're taking too much, it can cause insulin resistance. So it is a fine line. The injection frequency of peptides is pretty much daily. That annoys people. I know it annoys me personally. I've tried peptides and I've just been like, fuck this, because they take months to work for me. BPC and TB500 as a recovery peptide for little nagging things can be awesome. Absolutely awesome. A lot of the peptides are being banned and cracked down upon and stuff like that. But they do get offered because you can mark them up quite favorably at a lot of clinics. So guys may not know what they don't need, but if you look at the list of like all the peptides that exist, it's like every ailment you could ever think of. Sure. There's a peptide that exists for that. Yeah. So what I tell our guys, I'm like, if you want to try it, go ahead. I don't think you need XYZ. And if they're dealing with some nagging issue or they've strained something, I think one of the recovery peptides can definitely be beneficial. But from what I've heard, using the growth hormone ones, those were created for the economical perspective. And also the side effects are less with things like ipamorelin and CJC, and it's like a few amino acids off what the actual growth hormone molecule is. Guys have spoken favorably on sleep for that, helping with sleep and recovery.
Okay. Sure.
I tried it. I didn't notice anything.
Yeah. So for you, it would be IGF-1. That would be the main kind of marker you would look at to see if something like that is.
That's the only thing that we can go on.
Yeah, because sometimes people will be like, well, I'm on 200 milligrams a week and my libido's still low, so I'm being suggested this. But in reality,
that would make no sense.
That's what I mean. So like, again, a lot of the time, I think the physicians who are maybe suggesting them are just doing it because that's in their plethora of things they're meant to offer.
Yes.
Because a lot of the time I was like, well, why did the physician say you should take it? And they kind of can't really answer it. You know what I mean? So again, and then in that scenario, if it's an IGF-1 thing, if we're just talking about someone for general health who maybe isn't weight training or not weight training seriously, is that going to be that important, do you feel?
No. Honestly, if they need testosterone, that's like the big shining problem here. One thing at a time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you touched on something that I see a lot is because there's TRT clinics popping up all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
So if somebody goes to a TRT clinic, typically they're going to come home with testosterone, growth hormone, HCG, and an AI.
Yeah.
Like with basically no labs being done.
Yeah.
Like, here's what you did, which is insane, but that happens frequently, like all the time, where... What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I live in Florida where they are every,
So
5
you're
minutes.
seeing the same thing.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of my time is spent but educating guys on why the clinic that they went to is giving them a poor protocol and what they can expect going somewhere else, like a place like Merrick, for example. So a lot of the times that cookie cutter protocol, and then they feel bad. But then they can't get a hold of somebody at this clinic. They haven't done labs. They haven't been told they need to do labs. They don't know why they're taking these things. They're just like, I spent $2,000 and I have all these things I have to inject and take, and I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, God. And I feel bad because they spent all this money and they were told that they have to take all these things. So I explained the reasoning behind the prescription of said list of stuff and why this clinic may have given it to them. And then I explained to them why they probably don't need half of it.
So why, what would be the why? Like, why are they doing it?
Money.
Well,
yeah. Say that's HCG. You'll look online, the people that tell guys you need to take HCG with your testosterone make money off of it.
Sure.
Most of the time. A lot with peptides because you can mark those up. Testosterone, it's you can't patent a hormone. So that is why the alternate delivery methods are all created, the nasal sprays and pellets and all those things, because they can monetize that. But actual hormone, like something the body makes, well, there's only so many ways to go about that. But we have all these peptides that do all these things. I've even heard guys say, well, my doctor said instead of testosterone, I should try peptides. And I'm like, what? Which ones and why? And it would be like a growth hormone peptide. I'm like, that doesn't do anything to your testosterone.
Sure.
Or somebody in the Discord group was told to take Nugenics. And I was like, that is amazing. Like, I've heard so many weird things where it's like, let's go every route possible not to take the one thing we need.
Yeah.
And it does not make sense. If you need testosterone, why can't we just take testosterone?
Sure.
So you need a black shirt. Why would I keep giving you an orange one?
Yeah. So with HCG, do you only see it playing a role for those who are interested in fertility when they're on TRT? Is that like kind of its sole role, would you say?
Yes. That and maintaining the size of the testicles, as we were talking about before.
Okay.
Some guys may experience testicular shrinkage, not all of them. And HCG is a very hot topic also in the TRT world, similar to AIs, because clinics will give that out with testosterone as like, this is your burgers and your fries and, your Coke is going to be the AI. If a guy wants to conceive, it's more important as to that window he wants conception to occur. So if you came to me and you're like, I want to have a baby within the next 6 months, then bringing on HCG with something else called FSH, which is bioidentical, is a very powerful fertility protocol. But if you're like, I want to have a baby in 5 years, then there's no reason to bring it on. And if a guy really, really struggles with the size of his testicles, we can wait until, if they shrink, to bring that on.
Sure.
Not all guys do well on HCG.
Sure.
Let's think about what HCG is. So human chorionic gonadotropin, it's a pregnancy hormone. There's no long-term studies on the effects of injecting a man with a female pregnancy hormone for long periods of time. How could that be a good thing? And so the negative side effects guys can experience are some sexual dysfunction, moodiness, water retention, a lot of the estrogenic side effects. And so if not all guys do well on it, why are we giving it to them just to give it to them? So they're not all guys go sterile either when they're given testosterone. So it can have a suppressive effect. But the biggest thing that you can do to make sure that you are producing sperm is your health. And this goes back to the boring shit where it's like lifestyle, nutrition, training. Are you drinking alcohol? Are you doing things that are going to work against you in producing healthy sperm?
Yeah.
Let's look at that first. So getting a sperm test done before testosterone is also important to understand where you are. And then when you go on testosterone, do a sperm test 3 months later, 6 months later to understand where you're sitting. And then if you want to conceive, all right, let's put a 4-month protocol or 6-month protocol in with FSH, which is bioidentical. It's a little more expensive, but if you're going to have a kid, you should be able to afford FSH. And then bringing HCG in, produce sperm, put a bun in the oven, and then come off of that, because not all guys do really well on it. So,
So is the whole kind of fear about like, I don't want to start TRT because we still want to have a kid or whatever, is that pretty much unfounded? And are people actually potentially doing more harm than good by maybe affecting their fertility long-term by living with low T when they shouldn't be? So, they could actually be negatively affecting their long-term ability to conceive by not starting it.
That, but also, do you want to go into fatherhood hypogonadal? Do you want to perform your best? Do you want to have a child when you're not 100% you? Yeah. So it does bring a lot of questions, and it is a conversation to be had, because there are guys in their 20s who have very low testosterone levels, and then they get put on enclomiphene or they get put on HCG monotherapy because they don't want to suppress their HPTA axis. Totally understand that. However, if he needs testosterone, I think testosterone would be the correct route. And then when he does want to conceive, HCG and FSH, it is a very, very powerful, proven formula for fertility. Sure. But I would not want a guy to live, 10 years or whatever through his 20s as a hypogonadal male and not reap the benefits of operating. Sure. Again, we're putting past, like, we've exhausted all the natural things. Like, we've addressed his health, we've addressed body fat, training, all that stuff. And he's still at like 200. Like, there's kids that are living like that.
Yeah, sure.
I see it all the time where they're like, I had a guy who said, my son's 25, his testosterone was 190. The doctor wants him to take enclomiphene, which I'm very much against. I don't like enclomiphene. It causes so many side effects. It can cause fatty liver. It can cause floaters in the eyes. It will make your labs look pretty, but it does not necessarily provide symptom resolution. But they just want to maintain his natural testosterone production. But that's not really what it's doing. He's not going to necessarily feel any better. If he needs testosterone, I think that would be the right route to go. So bringing in those protocols for fertility, I think are very important, but not every clinic's going to understand that or agree with that. Because a lot of the times guys will get put, like, if they're borderline low T, they'll get put on something like enclomiphene or HCG.
I mean, my retort to that kind of concern sometimes would be, well, if your testosterone's that low, how do you plan on conceiving? You're probably not even going to want to, right? If you have all those kind of symptoms. But then I would also point to the number of IFBB pros that have all managed to have children.
100%.
And I'm not saying there aren't those that have
Yeah.
done that kind of level of PEDs and then can't. But I'm saying is if even 10% of those can, the chances of you being able to conceive with whatever protocol might be appropriate whilst taking your 200 milligrams a week is probably pretty good.
If it worked as contraception, then that would be the go-to contraception. And I'll steal Dave Lee's joke of what do you call the guy who thinks testosterone is contraception? Dad. Because there are a lot of bodybuilders.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Grams of testosterone.
No, I've seen
plus
it. I've seen it, and I've seen it a couple times to where you're like, there's no way. No way. Like, you need a paternity test. There's no way. But there is. Going back to labs. And I may have some of my own ignorance that goes into this. Should stool be done before the actual labs or with the labs? Because if you don't have the ability to actually digest through the gut, then other lab markers can be off because of that. And it could be a gut biome issue instead of being an actual lab marker issue.
So if someone presents with gut issues, I used to be very like, let's do a stool test. Because when I used to do them for... It's like studying them, I think.
Are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? You know, things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a table talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over the counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being.
I've done like almost all the ones that are offered. They're annoying to do. Shipping your poop in the mail is not like a fun thing to do.
No,
but
I've done it.
The data that it provides, like it's like, but it's hard to interpret. And I know Dr. Serrano's not favorable to a lot of them because he's like, this is one day. This could change the next day, and the protocol could be entirely different. So gut health, I think, is something that still we have a long way to go before we truly understand that. A lot of the guys who have complained of gut issues, who have done labs with us, usually come in hypothyroid. And I have two guys who have Hashimoto's, and they're ones who are more likely to go the carnivore route where there's nothing irritating them, and because they feel no matter what they eat, they feel some sort of gut issue. And I'm like, wow, you have Hashimoto's and you've never been told this? And they're like, no. And their antibodies are off the charts, or they have subclinical hypothyroidism, and that can contribute to some of the gut health issues. But if they want to do a stool test, we can absolutely do that. And I would say you can do that whenever, really. And there is like a protocol you have to follow with vitamins and supplements you can't take leading up to that.
Yeah.
Probiotics, stuff like that. But I do think like people think, oh, I have gut problems. It can't be the food that I eat if it's low quality. So they'll throw a probiotic on it. They may or may not feel better. Is it placebo? We don't know. When we look at lab markers, things that can show up, hypothyroid or low CO2 usually means some sort of gut thing is happening. If there's CRP, if that's elevated a little bit, some of the inflammatory markers, or if you just see like inflammation across the board and high triglycerides and blood sugar, is mismanaged. Are you having trouble digesting? Some people are oblivious to it. If you're in tune with what you eat and your diet, like we all probably would know if a food affected us. But going back to like the Gen Pop, they're so used to eating a lot of these things, they may think that's normal too. So
when you say you take on a client then, who's, maybe on the fence about TRT and just, is maybe not in a great state in general, and that's why they come to you, what would that initial first blood panel kind of look like? What were the things that because there's going to be so many people out there that might go on somewhere like Marek and just be like, I don't have a fucking clue. Do you know what I mean? There's so many different options. And
well, we have a specialized panel. There's two of them. So there's a full panel and there's a half panel. It's www.marek.com/table talk. Description, link in bio, 10% off first order. But go ahead.
Yeah,
but you are correct though, because there's a lot of people, probably yourself included, that has panels set up, for their clients. But if you go on there and you don't know those pages and you're just looking at here's all the panels, that's how I used doing it before Marek. It's like, oh my God.
It's overwhelming. Yeah.
Like, what am I going to
do? I need a full panel? Do I need a half panel? Like, what would you like
it adds
to
up
see?
Too.
Yeah.
So,
without like getting exhaustive, like what would maybe be the big rocks?
Well, it's a good question too, because if I was to go to one of the sites that I used to use, to order the panels, the default is just going to be, okay, here's the basic panel. And that sometimes isn't giving you everything that you really need to be able to know if anything's off. It's going to give you the basic stuff. But there was always something that Saran would have to add this to be able to put it on there. So I'm putting that out there because there are multiple, who knows how many now, right? Multiple places you just go order the panels, and they're all legal. They're all fine. They send the lab requisition. Now you may have to pay way more than what you think because there's a lot of back end shit that pops up from that. Like they don't tell you that, LabCorp's going to charge you. And there's there's a lot of other things they don't really tell you. But, to direct the question back, what would be some of the main things? Yeah,
we have so if they're on the fence about TRT and they haven't gotten labs done, you have to run LH and FSH to determine if they are hypogonadal, which type of hypogonadism do they suffer from, primary or secondary. And so primary, you're going to see an elevation in LH and FSH because they're like screaming at the testicles, hey, produce, and the testicles aren't producing. And that's usually guys who are older or who have had trauma to the testicles or have a varicocele or something like that. And pretty much the only way to rectify that is testosterone replacement. Secondary is more of a stress-induced type of hypogonadism where you'll see suppressed LH and FSH. And so those guys are pretty much the majority of who we're dealing with. And that's why it's important to understand where they fall, because if they have been kicked in the testicles and they're 32 years old, then that could be elevated LH and FSH. But basically, if you're stressed out, which again, everyone talks about stress, manage your stress. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Like,
I'm going to, because that's one of the topics on here.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, how do you define stress? Because you did say, like, what does that mean? Because stress is a very broad term. Like depression's a broad term.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a broad term, so it's like, what does this mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, so, because you say stress, it's going to mean a million things to a million different people, but it's going to mean different things to a physician who's going to look at specific markers. So when we talk about stress here, how are we defining it?
So it's basically an input that is causing, or a stimulus that is causing you personally, each person to react a certain way. So how they're dealing with said stimulus, which can be something they may or may not feel. So there are subjective measures to that, which are like, I feel stressed out. Okay, but why? What is that from? And these are questions I'll ask. Like, is there anything that you're going through right now in life? Did you just have a baby? Have you moved? Any deaths in the family, traumatic events? We ask people, like, what is your relationship with your wife like? Because all of these things can be stressors. Sleep, lack of sleep, under eating, overeating, training a lot, not training enough. Those are all inputs to your body that you may or may not feel. And then the objective measures can be your blood pressure. Like if your blood pressure is high, you may not feel it, but it's showing me clearly. If your resting heart rate is 85, that's showing you're stressed clearly. And now we look at labs and we see that you have high inflammation markers. Well, this is all showing something different than what you may feel, that now we know, all right, there is a load on the body that the body's responding to by suppressing testosterone because it's threatened. So it's not going to say, well, procreation's like the best thing to happen right now while you're threatened. So it's going to suppress testosterone and all the sex hormones. So that's how we would define stress, because it can show up in so many different ways. And a lot of guys don't really know because they're just trying to push through and they're just trying to survive. And being in survival mode can look like I'm sacrificing my sleep because I just had a baby and I'm waking up at different times, but I'm trying to get my workout in because they think they have to do it 6 days a week. And then they're trying to do XYZ and it's actually causing them more stress. So you really have to sit down with somebody and understand, like, what is your routine daily? How are you sleeping? What is your history with all this? How do you deal with it? What is your coping mechanism? What is your bedtime routine? And what are your outlets? And if you've had a traumatic life event, have you ever talked to anybody about it? Not that I'm going to say go do therapy before we even start TRT, but it's more, have you opened up about these things? Because I'll have guys on calls where they'll open up about how they started a business and they feel alone on an island. They have nobody to talk to because a lot of guys don't have close friends. So they've never confided in the fact that, yeah, I go through all these business challenges and I don't really talk to anybody about it, but I don't want my wife to know that I'm struggling with this in the business, or finances are an issue, or, dealing with certain team members is really getting on me. And understanding what they're going through in their life, or, my wife is against TRT, or my wife does not support me. That's a big one. I ask all the time, is your wife active? Is she into fitness? Does she support you? Does she know you're on a call with me right now? Is this a journey that she's on board with you with? Because if you don't have that support at home, it's going to be very challenging. Are your friends supportive? Or do they want you to go out and drink every weekend? Or are they going to make fun of you for wanting to get healthier and be able to be more resilient when these stressful events happen? Those are all important questions that I feel coaches should be asking, because men are not going to divulge that information right away. They're not going to show up on a call and be like, you know what? My relationship with my wife right now is not great, and I'm talking to you behind her back, and she will freak out if I mention the word testosterone, or if I go to the gym and spend time there and don't spend time at home. Like, there's a lot going on. And that's going back to when you said defining health, or defining what that looks like for somebody, and getting to the why. Like, if I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to show up better as a role model for my kids, why? There's always a reason why, and you have to keep digging and peeling those layers till you get to the truth, to really understand somebody's motive for why they want to do what they do. If somebody's going to a high school reunion, they may say, oh yeah, I want to show up at my high school reunion jacked. Yeah, but why? Well, I got bullied as a fat kid in high school all the time. Like, I want to fuck, stuff like that.
I think in those scenarios as well, it's important to maybe define or differentiate between stress and over or chronic stress, because zero stress is not good either. Stress is what makes us grow as people and become better and improve our skill sets, but chronic and over stress is going to lead to all those down regulations and negative side effects. So like, I think that, if we were all talking training here, it would make easy sense. If we just said training stress, everyone would know what we're talking about. Like, well, if you're doing a workout and then you're going in 48 hours later and you're still sore as shit and you feel like you've got brain fog from your last workout, chances are that was too much training stress. Whereas you can kind of apply the same thing to your day to day. Like, are you waking up every day exhausted from the previous day? Because if you are, then chances are, on a day-to-day basis, you're building up some kind of deficit or exceeding your capacity in just being able to deal with life. And obviously that leads on for so long, right? There's only so long you can get away with that. And then invariably we usually see like caffeine dependency come in and all that type of thing. So like sometimes the easy question can just be like, how do you wake up and feel like fresh and ready for your day? Or do you feel like you've still got a million things to do from yesterday, and that to-do list or whatever, that mental checklist you have to deal with is just getting infinitely larger every day? Do you know what I mean? And
to stay with the training example though, because this is kind of how my brain works with this, is over a period of time of training, so maybe you don't recover, but as you slowly increase your work capacity, you're able to do CrossFitters. I mean, the insane amounts of work capacity because it's progressively overloaded over time. Stress is the same way, to where, it's, you have stress, but you also have to build up your tolerance for that stress, where it seems like we live in a society where everybody wants to reduce and make that stress tolerance lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And then they'll use, labs and stuff like that to be able to kind of fix what some would say is a very low stress capacity.
Yes.
Instead of increasing the stress capacity, to be able to handle more shit, because it's easy to sit there and look to one person and say, man, I can't believe you're so stressed out about that, right?
Yeah.
And that may be coming from a good place, but it may be coming from a place that you've dealt with so much more stress than what that is, but they haven't. Yeah. And they don't want to back away from that. Like training, they got to figure out, how to progressively overload, to be able to increase that stress tolerance so it won't hit those markers, and that's what I wonder with, some of the lab work and stuff like that, is because there's no narrative that's really going into all that. To some people could be super stressed about things that they really have no control over their life. It really has no impact over their life. They're blowing things completely out of proportion. They're making things out to be way worse than what they can be. Anxiety, or just stuck in shit that they fucked up years ago and they can't get out of all that. And then their markers are all screwed up. And a lot of what they're running through their heads is false reality, which is creating the stress to where that area has to be addressed, where I worry sometimes that the default is I'm stressed, and we don't know what that capacity is. I'm going to get the labs done, and then we're going to pharmacize, or supplement, whatever this is, instead of actually, or even worst case, benzos or some shit like that, to be able to manage that instead of building that tolerance. Because as you get older, the stress just changes. It becomes bigger, and your capacity becomes, or should, that's one of the things I worry about, should, become higher, because worse shit's going to happen. And so that's one of my concerns that's why I said, how do we define stress, right? Because from a medical side, you can see a disruption in a marker, right? And that is stress, right? That marker's distressed, right? So then that's in there. So that marker, can be pharmacized, I suppose. What would you call that? Like prescribed? I don't even know what you would call that.
Pharmaceutically.
Medically
intervened, right? And maybe that's okay, for a short term to be able to build that tolerance, where we had that conversation with Ozempic. Like maybe that's okay, for that short term to be able to build the habits with that. Same with the testosterone, is maybe that's okay to start straight with that, so you can use that time period to build the natural, the other healthy habits that are going to be able to build that up. But there's a big gap there, right? Because sometimes, in probably most cases, when that intervention happens, that building the habits around that intervention don't.
And I think, without sounding too like new agey, we have a bigger control over that than I think most people give credit to. Like there's a reason that all the studies on mindfulness and meditation almost always bring back positive results, right? And one of the best exercises that I heard was basically just get like a notebook and write down like everything you can think about that's ever stressed you out, like minimum 100 list. And then first off, cross off all the things that actually turned out okay. Then cross off all the things that didn't go okay, but like a day or two later, you've forgotten about them. Like it's irrelevant. It didn't have any kind of lasting impact on your life. So then you're left with stuff that went bad and is traumatic for a long period of time. Okay. So then cross off all of those traumatic things that being stressed about them actually make the outcome better. And then basically you get every person ends up in the scenario where there's nothing left on the list that isn't crossed out. And I'm not saying it's as simple as that, but it's a good illustration to people that most stress exists outside of the present. It's either about past events or present events. And unfortunately, it never really helps anything, like a small amount of stress is normal for something that you care about because it makes you put effort in and, prepare for a podcast or whatever it might be. But overstressing and anxiety, it doesn't actually ever achieve any positive outcome. And I'm not saying that means it'll be gone for that person straight away, but once you realize that, and that actually it's never benefited or had any good impact, and that, at the end of the day, you are still here regardless of whether you stressed about it or not, it can really help just people put into perspective, like, oh, maybe I am just wasting my energies and stuff like that. Yeah. But, I mean, that's also where I think physical training comes in a lot, because we all do workouts we don't want to do. And we all do workouts that 20% of the way through, we're like, I'm not sure I'm getting through this. And then what happens almost invariably is you either complete it, well done, or maybe you fail, but you still survived. You know what I mean? You didn't die in the workout, right? And that, all of those act as a positive reinforcement to be like, yeah, okay, you're suffering in the moment, but that moment's gone in a moment.
Okay. Now that we covered the low-hanging fruit, the big rock, now when it does say they are stress tolerant and all that, then what are the markers that you would see flagged with the blood work?
If they have a good tolerance for stress?
Well, let's assume that they do, right? Because shit still happens, right? Yeah. I mean, there's still going to be traumatic, stressful experiences that are going to impact and show up through those blood markers. What are some of the biomarkers that are going to be disrupted because of that? And then, because that takes it to the next level, because once those are disrupted and they're not treated, then it's going to compound and become worse and worse and worse and worse. So what are some of the markers? And then if it compounds without being treated, what can the outcome end up being?
You can still see a suppression in the sex hormones, but one thing that is worth looking at is DHEA and pregnenolone, because you'll find deficiencies in guys who have lower levels of stress tolerance. They'll have like a pregnenolone deficiency and anxiety, stress like that. Then that's where the caffeine dependence comes into play and the stimulants, and they just have a very low threshold to anything thrown at them. And it's kind of like on labs, like if testosterone's low, it's usually not the only thing that's contributing to the overall picture. It's usually the symphony of all the hormones working together. And if someone's very deficient in pregnenolone and then they rectify it, it could actually help calm them down and get better rest and be able to deal with a lot of that stuff. And if somebody is tolerant to stress, you may see that their pregnenolone is fine. If that is low, then that could be like the one missing piece that they need in order to be able to be a little bit more calm and collected, because pregnenolone will convert to progesterone, which has a calming, relaxing effect. We don't want an excess of that, especially in men, because then they could get gyno from that. They can get female fat deposition, or like gummy worm dick, like decadick, kind of like similar. And DHEA, same thing. Guys will take that off the shelf, not even measure their labs on that. If you have excess DHEA, you can be very highly stimulated. You could actually have premature ejaculation. So guys who have trouble finishing may be deficient in DHEA. Guys who finish too fast may be just taking it haphazardly and be overstimulated. So you just like,
gave a lot of guys an excuse. So you've done your bit for the male part of society.
Yeah, because I do get asked that, like, because guys are like, I just can't finish. Or if they go on TRT and it goes either direction, and it's like everything has to be in their place. And that's why on our panel we have pregnenolone, DHEA, LHFSH, the sex hormones, stuff like that. You're laughing at something.
It's, the premature or ejaculation cracks me up a little bit, because we live in a society that wants the outcome fast, right? Well, that's the outcome. Like, so what are you bitching about if it takes 30 seconds instead of 20 minutes? This is the opposite of everything else you want to manifest in your life.
Like, I can't finish, fast enough. Well, how long is too long? Like, and who's saying this? You or her, like, or him or it or whatever, like the way you're going. But like, who's defining what too long is, and who's defining what premature means too?
I actually had some questions since we kind of broached that anyway. Do you find that obviously most men, if they've got some kind of like sexual dysfunction, whatever it might be, will usually look at like TRT as the the golden ticket. Like
100%.
that's going to fix everything, right? Like I'm going to be this fucking stud now. But like, as you've said there are so many more hormones that play a role. So you just mentioned a couple of them there, but like if a guy comes to you with just primarily sexual dysfunction and just wants TRT because of that, are those the things that you're looking at outside of TRT? Because maybe they don't need TRT, you know, and maybe there are other things alone that are causing those deficiencies.
Yeah, sex drive is it's a very deep subject, and it's something I have no problem talking to guys about very openly, because I'm like, so what does sex drive mean? When did this start to diminish? What are you experiencing? Are you experiencing you can't get an erection at all? Can you get an erection? You can't sustain it? Is it not as strong as it used to be? Do you not have the same attraction to your partner? Is this someone you've been with a very long time? Do you have a girlfriend? Like there's very taboo areas you have to go sometimes because you really need to know the truth behind it. And a lot of men think it's just a deficiency in testosterone. And on the other side, they think, well, my dick works fine, so I must be fine with testosterone, yet they have like all the brain fog and other symptoms. So it's understanding what are they defining as low sex drive and how long has this been going on? Because it can be they're watching too much porn and they're just not sensitive to it and it's excessive. Or
is that a common problem, do you find?
Some guys. I've had guys say like I've tried to decrease the amount of porn I've watched from 4 hours to 2 hours and daily and all that. And it's
4 hours.
4 hours. Yeah.
Are they just watching it like Netflix? Like a marathon? I don't
ask like which platform.
No, I get that. But like, you know, it's not like sitting down to watch Game of Thrones for a few hours, right?
Well, I did find, I don't know where I saw this at, but it was a study done on who consumes the most porn.
Yeah.
And the United States is the highest. It's like 60%.
Well, you got to be the best at everything.
It's
right?
like 60%. I mean, the other countries are way, way lower. You know, 20% and so forth.
I believe it.
It's way higher.
It's such a taboo topic, and like I'll just joke with guys, but I also provide them the opportunity to be open about things, because I'm like, all right, if you've been with a partner for, you know, X number of years and you have like these kinks that you've never talked about, and then you're trying to explore that through porn, have you had a discussion with your partner about it? And they're like, I did not expect this with coaching, but you know, they go right into that conversation, because those are important things to have discussions about, because now if you're trying to like feed that need somewhere else that is giving you a disservice elsewhere in your life, like, you know, now you can't have sex with your partner because you have all this other stuff on your mind, or you have a vision of what it should look like younger guys who watch porn through high school and they think that's what sex is supposed to look like, and then they actually have it and they can't have actual intimacy because they have this other idea of what it should be. It does involve a conversation, a full-on conversation. So getting back to the sex drive thing, and that's where defining stress also comes into play, because sometimes they don't know what is stressful. And I will say there are several guys that we've had come to us with low sex drive, or they just can't keep up with their partner because they're under eating. And literally, as soon as we increase calories within 2 weeks, they're like, oh my gosh, like I can get a rock hard boner again. And they were just traumatized over it. And one of our guys recently, he was like, I have tried everything. And when you think of all the biohacking things that could exist for sex drive, he has tried them. He's tried medication. He's tried coming off medications. He's tried not training. He's tried training. And he said to me, you know, the only time I realized that my sex drive is higher is when I travel for events for work and I'm eating like shit and I'm horny. And I'm like, let's back up. You told me that when you eat like shit, which is probably more calories than you're used to eating at home, your sex drive comes back. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, he had just told me he's training 2 hours a day and he's not tracking his food. And I said, so give me like a typical day where you're eating. And like quick math in my head, it was like 100 grams of protein. It was like 1,800 calories. And I'm like, so you're training 2 hours a day, sometimes longer. You're walking on top of that. So 4 hours of activity that you're feeding as a 200-pound man with 1,700 to 1,800 calories, maybe because you gave me a sample day. And he was like, the light bulb went off.
Yeah.
Sure enough, within 2 weeks, increasing calories. And he was like, wow. So that's a stressor on the body, but guys don't perceive that, or I don't think anybody would really perceive that as a stressor. But yeah, your body's threatening because it's threatened because it's not getting the fuel that it needs. So a lot of the times guys think that testosterone would be the answer. You can put testosterone on that and it's not going to help him. No. And quite often there are guys who may go on TRT and they experience lower sex drive and they don't know why. And if you think about testosterone is a very sympathetic hormone, so it's putting them into a higher sympathetic drive. And now take all the stress, and I think the term for that's allostasis, everything combined. And it's like, yo, we got to calm down. And now we have to do inventory again of everything else going on, because they think that that was the magic solution to help the sex drive, and it actually made it worse.
You mentioned like guys being like ashamed or closeted about stuff there. So this, I'm going to sound like a prude when I say this, but like,
well, you are
in a society where like, you know, everything is becoming more and more sexualized gradually, right? We can probably all agree that. Like, why do you think that is becoming a bigger problem for people in relationships? Do you think it's like a social skills or a communication issue? Like in the people that you deal with, maybe that have those kind of sexual dysfunctions with their partner, a lot of the time, is it just like a communication thing, or is it maybe a lack of self-confidence that they're going to be judged and all this type of thing?
All the above.
Okay.
I just ejaculated energy drink on my face, so it's like looks like I'm crying.
System.
I'm not crying.
Straight in the eye for quicker delivery.
Kinky things get me so emotional. I think it's communication. It's again, if you've been with someone for years, maybe you were a different person or showed up as a different person when you got married or when you started dating than you are now. Maybe you suppressed your sexual interests, and then now that you've matured or you feel more confident, or maybe you've gotten in shape and you actually want to take your shirt off, be more public, whatever it is, I think that they've realized, oh, this is something I want to explore. I don't know how to articulate that because I don't want to scare the shit out of somebody. And in America, as we discussed offline, it's still such a taboo, suppressed subject, where in other countries they have like way more sex clubs and parties and all that. And I'm not telling everyone, hey, go to a sex club and have a sex party, but it is such a topic that doesn't get talked about. Like, you know, you say the word sex, it's like, oh, you know, like,
and yet porn consumption is the highest in the world. It doesn't really make sense.
But it does.
It does if you think about it.
Yeah. You know, like this is where they're getting like, okay, BDSM and this category, and then the extreme BDSM, and then Futanari. Like I know all these things because I look at it all, because I'm like, what category pops up today? Because something is going to come up. And guys and women too explore this stuff. And I think that it's a freedom of expression, but it does come down to communication. Like if this is something you want to try, I do feel like polyamory has gotten more trendier, or, you know, open relationships and stuff like that. There's shows about it. There's people on social media who are talking about being in relationships like that, which in America, we're like, oh my God, you know, and especially if you're religious, that's looked at as a bad thing. But is it? Because I'm of the perception of like, if this makes you happy and you're not harming anybody, like, do you, you know, and that's a whole other conversation where people get very judgmental over how you and I wear our hair. We like it. There's people who don't agree with it. That's fine. They can wear their hair however they want. And if it makes you happy, imagine if the world was more accepting of that stuff. Like if someone's not harming somebody, not breaking the law, like, and just doing what makes them happy, then cool, you know? So as a far tangent off, you know, kinky sex, but I think that like me personally, I started taking pole dancing lessons because number one, I needed a hobby outside of work, didn't want to get hurt. So jujitsu was out. And I was like, this is a very feminine way of me expressing my own sexuality in a way that I am dealing with men and, you know, sexual dysfunction all day long. And I'm very much a bro, and I'm talking to guys all day long. Here's a chance for me to meet more women and like be more expressive in that. And there's actually other women doing the same thing. They're like, I'm in my seductress era. And like, it's kind of like Halloween where you feel like you could dress like a slut, but like, it's okay. Where, you know, pole dancing, you have to be half naked to stick to the pole when you're climbing up it and stuff. And it's a way to appreciate what your body can do and just like express yourself like anybody would in any type of dance or anything. And I think when it comes to sexual activity, these are ways of people expressing themselves, except they feel they have to do it through porn and through very closed doors, where if they actually had a discussion with their partner that was very open, and like any hard discussion, it's going to be hard because we're afraid of people's reactions. And that's another thing that you can chalk under, like, what is stress? Well, this person's reaction, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be forward and communicate clearly as to your wants and needs. So that was like major tangent.
Well, you just mentioned kind of a key word there, which is responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's kind of important across all the subjects that we've kind of covered, right? And I think maybe some of the reason that TRT gets like everything, there's big divides in opinion, right? And some of the reason that TRT clinics maybe get a bad rap is because some people view it as people shirking their responsibility for their own health onto someone else, right? Which personally, I think is something that's slowly happening in general. But how do you feel like that when, let's say, you get a client who isn't doing the things they should be doing to look after themselves, and you can tell that quite clearly but they expect the cure-all from the TRT clinic or from yourself or Mark or whatever. How do you go about bridging that gap between kind of making that light bulb moment where, like, you can have all the drugs in the world if you want, but your health is your responsibility. Unless you're doing the groundwork, this isn't gonna do anything? Because that must be quite a difficult realization for some people, especially when we're in a society where we're used to outsourcing so much.
100%. And I love that question, because I feel the reason people say they're drawn to me and my team is they're like, you're no bullshit, and I appreciate your communication. Because I feel that we're so scared to communicate effectively and truthfully that we either try to hide it or dance around it. And I have found that with men specifically, direct, clear, structured communication works very well. If I try to talk around it or do a read between the lines, it doesn't go over so well. And I fuck that up anyway, because if I try to be like soft or coddling, it comes across as very unnatural. And I only know how to show up as me, and I communicate a certain way. And not that I'm a dick about it, but I will explain to them, like, we can, labs help in this sense because they have something tangible to see how their behavior is actually affecting their health. And then if you help them understand what the consequences are down the road, you have grandchildren, you have kids. If this gets any higher, it's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to get on the floor and play with them. You may be in a hospital bed by that time. And that is what has to, unfortunately, be the impetus to get them to pay attention sometimes. But I feel it's having a very honest conversation.
You can even see from like the clips that we posted of your last podcast with us when we were talking about TRT, there's a big crowd of people that are like, well, if they just got some sunlight and did some walking and, that like maybe, but like, some people are doing all that, and it's not a case of like, oh, just do TRT so you don't have to do these things. It's a case of do TRT because you need it, but also do these things, and I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there where people think that, okay, I'm sure there are a lot of TRT clinics, like you said, are just, here you go, here's your drugs, that's whatever dollars. But there's also a lot of people that are trying to do it right, which is, here, this is what you need, this is what you need to be doing to actually make this do something. And I think there's a big crowd of people that maybe don't see that connection there.
It's also defining what TRT is. So this isn't anabolic steroids at a level that's going to gain you rapid muscle mass. You're replacing what you should already be biologically producing. In order to reap the benefits of where you should be, you have to live in order to earn those levels of testosterone, which you're not doing right now. And I can guarantee that if you do that, you're going to have a better experience. And this goes back to the side effects and stuff like that. You don't see bodybuilders, and they're taking 10, 20 times the dose of TRT. They don't sit on the couch and inject themselves and then they turn into muscle the next day, which people still argued with me because of the one study they did at 600 milligrams, whatever. But they still go to the gym. And those guys are trying to get big, and they still have to address everything else in their life. This is just going to help you. And this is going to bring you to where you should already be functioning optimally as a man. And bring in the attention of, like, this is the actual definition of TRT. but you do still have to do all this other work.
Yeah. Do you think, like, Dave has spoken quite a lot about, you know, the fact that like PEDs, for example, are now more common but more spoken about, and that comes with positives and negatives, like high school kids doing tren. But do you think the proliferation of PEDs and the material available on them is perhaps skewing people's perception? Because now people know about testosterone and the effects and blah, blah, blah. Do you think that is actually, so now when people hear TRT, they think pro athlete, pro bodybuilder, because that's where obviously most of the talk and literature and knowledge comes from. So do you think that's kind of playing a role, just the fact that most of the sports athletes, high performers that everyone kind of looks up to are on those types of things? So then when they hear the word testosterone, they just go boom, straight to that kind of
especially
association.
The younger kids. I had a consult with a guy from the UK. Actually, he's 24, and he's like, so I've been training for 2 years, and I was thinking I should do a cycle. And I was like, why? Just want to understand. He's like, well, I don't feel I'm gaining muscle as quick as I should be. Mind you, he's like 6'4". So
it's got a lot to fill out.
Yes. And I was like, so you've been training for 2 years? And he's like, yeah. And he actually made a comment. He's like, you know, I want to look like you and the guys on your team. And I was like, do you know how old I am? And he's like, 40. I'm like, I'm 42. My first day in a gym, I was 15. That's a long time. And you're at this 2 years. And all the guys on my team, they're in their 40s. They've also been in gyms since they were teenagers. And he thought like his next step, because of who he sees on social media, was SARMs, testosterone, or some other anabolic. And it's like baffling. And this is not often because we don't get guys a lot in their early 20s. But I was like, man, it's 2 years is now like the threshold where guys start to feel this. And I'm sure it goes less.
I'm sure.
But they feel that they'll just gain that edge. And again, it came down to him telling me what he eats. And I was like, dude, you eat less protein than me. And I'm 5'3" and 56 kilos. And he's like, oh, like he had no idea. And being 6'4" and a hard gainer, like, I'm like, we got to like quadruple your calories right now. How about we give that a try for multiple years and get you in the gym and then see what that produces. Like when we were growing up, like you spend 10 years minimum. I'm like, let's give this till 5 years at least. You know?
How did he respond to that?
So he got it. Okay. He understood that he was being,
because that's not going to be a nice pill to swallow in this scenario, right? Because he thought he had the magic bullet now, and now he doesn't.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's that misconception? And what I mean by that is no one gets into swimming and says, just so you know, I don't want to be Michael Phelps, just in case that accidentally happens, right? But people do think, well, I've only been doing this for 2 years and I'm not Ronnie Coleman, or I don't, you know, the typical, I don't want to get too big, inverted commas, God forbid. So why do you think there is that misconception when it comes to lifting and hypertrophy and strength, that it can almost happen by accident?
I don't know. And I dealt with this when I was training a lot of golfers, because they're like, I can't get too big. And I'm like, we've been over this, like goblet squatting twice a week at 40 pounds is not going to get you there. And I there's a reel posted yesterday where I was talking about Tiger Woods and how a lot of the golfers were like, he is so jacked and huge, like I can't get big like him. And I'm like, okay, hold on. He's not that big. And then that, of course, set everybody off. But like, if you've seen Tiger in person, it's just like any bodybuilder, you see them on, you know, TV, on stage, in photos, they look huge. And then you meet them in person. It's not that they're small, but they're smaller. Like obviously looking lean and fit, you're going to appear bigger in photos and stuff similar to me. People are like, oh my God, you're so tiny when they meet me in person. I'm like, because when you're leaner, you appear larger. So, I don't know where they think that that's coming from. And I even like have been very public about how in December, when I was last with Serrano, I went off TRT because I was just lazy with injections. Because I literally traveled so much last year. I was like, I can't keep up with it. And I got my labs done. And he's like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel fine. He's like, okay, we'll run this. We'll see how you feel. So the labs I'm bringing him today, my testosterone is 13. And I keep telling people, look at how I looked in December and look how I look now. It's the same. So I didn't shrink and I didn't like lose all my muscle, but also it wasn't like I gained slabs of muscle being on TRT. Again, I'm on like 6 milligrams, you know, last 2 years, I was on 6 milligrams. I look this way still because of the behaviors in my life and the lifestyle that I live. Just to show the trolls, I've never been so natty in my life.
Are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? You know, things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a table talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over the counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being. All right, guys, you like the content that we put out through Elite FTS, if it's the podcast, extra content, it's 20 years of being on YouTube, so there's a lot of different content there. We set up a membership YouTube channel, and with the membership YouTube channel, what you'll get is early release on all the podcasts, so you'll get access to it before everybody else. Those will also all be ad-free, so you won't have any interruptions and can listen straight through. And we'll have exclusive content, such as AMAs, to where we'll take all your questions and then answer them for you guys. So take a moment, join the channel. Is that what it is? Join the channel, join the YouTube. Just hit the join button and help support the podcast, and we'll help you.
You know, the way that I answer that question, the too big or is I flip it in reverse, and I'll say, have you ever gone on a mini diet or just any kind of diet, and were you afraid that you were going to lose 60 pounds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just taking the same thing in reverse. And their brain, they're like, no, never. Well, why? Well, because it would take too long, you know, to be
boom.
Yeah.
I'm using that from
okay.
now on.
So,
and fat loss is quicker too.
Yeah, it's a lot quicker, right? So it's, but to your point, where the discussion is increased, you know, anytime there's a reaction, there's an action, there's going to be a reaction, which always happens. But and then what happens between that is, I mean, my advice is you just find the center. You know, because that's where the truth is, and it's going to be boring, and it's going to be simple, and it's going to be what people don't want to hear, because it's not going to be nuanced, but that's what it is. But there's always overcorrections on both sides, to where now we're starting to see more people come out speaking about bad side effects that they have, or the side effects they have when they are blasting really hard. And so that is that correction. Sure. You know, it takes time, you know, where that correction comes out, and you only need a few people. And then if those videos do well, and if it's YouTube, then there's going to be a lot more like, oh shit, you think that was bad? Let me tell you about this cycle that I did.
Yeah.
You know, my life was trashed. I got a divorce. My head was all fucked up. I lost 2 jobs. You know, all this shit kind of goes in there, and it just takes a little bit of time. Sure. But the easiest answer is just find the middle, and go there, and it's going to be, it's not going to be hyped. It's just going to be a normal conversation about everything that we're talking about, which isn't nuanced. All right, it doesn't have, you get what I'm saying. It doesn't have the bells and whistles, you know, that attracts people. And
because I'm sure you that probably creates a roadblock for you sometimes. Maybe when guys start TRT, they have just those hyped up expectations.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, so it's like, well, I must not be on enough because I'm not 8% body fat and 250 pounds yet, and I've been on it for 2 months, Ali.
Well, a lot of times though, it is validated though. A lot of times if they go on, you know, because there's nothing like the first
honeymoon phase.
Yeah. And it's important for them to know that doesn't last.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's blasting shit, that doesn't last.
It's an education, like, because the water weight gain alone, they think that's muscle. I gained 10 pounds in a month, and I'm like,
you keep
it's not
saying
muscle. Or it'll be, I gained 10 pounds in a month, and I'm like, it's not fat.
Yeah.
So wherever the head is, it's like, it's not fat, it's not muscle.
Yeah.
It's just water, and that will stabilize, because you're adding something your body hasn't been producing for years, and it's some exogenous hormone. Like, there's going to be a period where there's an adjustment. Like, your body's not a robot that you just like give it gas and it goes and you're fine. Like, there's a period of at least 6 months where it has to, like, you know, decide, okay, what is this thing you just put in my body? And now all these processes have to run at a better level, and then like give it time to adjust. But they will definitely think like, well, like a guy said to me the other day, he was like, I've been on for 2 months. When does it kick in? And again, what does kick in mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is it sex drive? Is it muscle?
Yeah. Is Captain America one day or whatever.
Yeah. And he was like, well, when will I feel the effects? And I have to keep digging. What does that mean? What does that mean? And so I said, same thing I just said to you guys, is it takes at least 6 months for you to have some symptom resolution, but it's a constant. Over the years, you're going to constantly evolve and, you know, reap the benefits of it. But it doesn't happen in 2 months. In 2 months, like, you may feel better and you may feel you sleep better. But if you're talking about the aesthetic benefits, then that's dependent on all these other things. But if you're doing all those things, it's going to be a year at least, you know, maybe more. It does help burn fat. It does help retain and build a little muscle, but it's not anabolic steroids. That's going to happen a lot quicker. Because very similar to fat loss, like if you excessively cut calories, you're not going to drop an excessive amount of fat quicker. Just like if you excessively eat, you're not going to expedite the process of muscle gain, even though fat loss is quicker, but there's no such thing as a mini bulk. Like, you know, so it's being a realist over what the expectations. I would say expectation management in any aspect of coaching is huge, because whether it's TRT or fat loss, gaining muscle, it's always going to take longer than somebody wants.
Let's take a break real quick. I got to pee.
Cool.
Okay, so let's jump into your event.
Yeah.
So how many years is this now? Is this 3?
This is year 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's grown. I started Silverback Summit year 1 with 40 guys, and now we're expecting 300. So it's been a cool trajectory. And the reason I started it was because there seemed to be no men's health specific events that covered everything we talked about today, with testosterone replacement, erectile dysfunction, peptides, hormones, all that stuff, combined with the nutrition, fitness, and business education with it. Like, there's a lot of women's health courses, women's health events, but I was like, why is there no men's health ones? And even the medical organizations have men's health as a topic, but they do restrict what they talk about, and they don't talk about what we've talked about and the actual protocols a lot of these doctors use, and the research behind prostate cancer and heart attacks and like optimal testosterone protocols. So I was like, let's bring this to one room where everyone can network, get to know other guys who are maybe ignorant or on TRT or have been on this journey forever, but have nobody to talk to because they feel like they're alone, and get them with all other dudes.
So who are you going to have presenting this time?
We have Dr. Eric Serrano. I am having Mike O'Hearn and his wife come because Mike had me on his podcast, and I want him and Mona to talk about what it's like running the businesses they do as a couple and how that integrates into their relationship and stuff like that. Because that comes up a lot, is business, relationship, but guys just don't talk about that often. Dr. Jordan Grant, Dave Lee, Luke Lehman, who's my coach. He's been my coach for 7 years, bless him. I said Eric Serrano, Mike Dolce, who is UFC nutrition and training coach. We have a panel of female practitioners because last year, actually, the discussion surrounding how talking to women about men going on TRT and becoming the best version of themselves actually helps women live best in their feminine, and how being a female handling men's health related topics, what that's like. Because a lot of women want to know what I do, but also what the female TRT practitioners do, and getting into that world, which I think is cool because there's not a lot of women in the men's health space. So we're going to have a combination of panel discussions and roundtables and very short talks. So instead of doing, 45-minute talks, which we did last year, we're going to have 3 per hour. So 20 minutes of solo talks where a lot of our practitioners can say, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is who I help, and maybe go off on a tangent over their specialty, and then break out into roundtables so that attendees can really go to the practitioner or the speaker they want to talk to, and that they feel they'll benefit the most from. Because we draw from the practitioner side. So we have medical practitioners, we have fitness professionals, and then we have Gen Pop and enthusiasts. It's like, how do you give to each demographic without them thinking, I don't need to listen about thyroid for 45 minutes, but I'll listen for like 15, 20. And then I can go talk to the person that really resonates with what I'm going through. So it's a ton of interaction for both the speakers and the attendees so that they can understand, like, this is what I really want to get out of it, network with other people and get that time with the speakers, because we do have socials, but if someone's bombarded, they don't have the time necessarily all the time to get what they want out of it. And then this year, what's also new is we're doing a VIP day. So the day before, we're going to have 30 people who are either medical practitioners or fitness pros who are really interested in business growth and optimization. All the topics will be surrounded with that. So we have Rick Collins talking about the legalities for both fitness and medical pros as to coaching and setting up your clinic. I have Justin Gross, who owns a TRT clinic in Tennessee, how to set up your business for TRT. Ryan McGinn, who runs my social media agency, talking about social media, because a lot of medical pros and fitness pros, that's like a huge world. How do you optimize social media so that you're getting the best out of it? Andrew Zaragoza from Mark Bell's podcast, talking about podcasting, setting up your podcast, do's and don'ts of that. Me, oh yeah, I forgot, I'll be speaking too. And also practitioners who want to get into coaching men. So everything that we do at Silverback Coaching, how is that different from other coaching companies? But also how do we capture men's health? Because I've had a lot of coaches that are like, I want to do what you do. How do I do that? How do I learn that? And I'm like, well, it's 15 years of a collection of different things. But anybody who really is I have a clinic or I have a coaching company that I really want to grow, that day would be for them. So Bedros is coming too.
What were some of the hot topics that happened last year?
The aromatase inhibitor got really hot, that panel, talking about that. Prostate cancer was pretty big.
With that one, was there a conclusion or was it just stayed debated?
So there were mixed opinions. So I make sure that there are, I know how everyone feels on certain subjects. Collectively, everybody is more against it.
Yeah.
There were a few who were there might be instances if and when, and I can't remember off the top of my head what those were. Male hormone optimization as a whole, outside of testosterone going into the other hormones, what are the things that we may be missing when we're only looking at testosterone, and how does that show up in a man's day to day, and what are the important parts, and business. So how do I show up as a business leader? How can I best do what I need to do while running a business to make it effective, to make it the best practices without it being this overly business coachy type of approach. The nutrition stuff, it was everything from low carb, high carb, carb timing, all the basic stuff. But I think that the basics are good to talk about and not really this esoteric type of approach, because really understanding what to eat, when to eat, and how you manipulate that based on your goal you can't talk about that enough. Like same with testosterone. Like you can't talk about the basic stuff alone enough. The best TRT protocol, fertility, even vasectomies, going into the weeds about that. We talked about psychedelics, GLP-1s, and how all of those are utilized in practices, which are things you can't talk about really at other medical conferences.
Now with these, because you said the AI, with some of those other topics where they're like point counterpoints, because I would like to see people debate, their different opinions on all that in an intellectual, professional way without being like without being like the internet.
Yes, it was not like the internet, which is awesome. People did comment on how they felt that the guys were able to express what their personal stance was on things, debated in a healthy way. Because I told everyone up front, I will not tolerate anyone being a dick. And we don't attract like assholes to this event. So everyone did say like, this is a really good group of dudes. So people were able to discuss their why and their stance on it. I would say Serrano was hilarious, as he is usually, when he would go off on his tangents on how he felt about certain things, mostly the cardiovascular stuff that was talked about. He had very strong opinions on. So I wouldn't say that like an overall conclusion was made, but it was more, this is a perspective. And each one of the practitioners discussing something like AIs, they're like, yeah, I could understand that. Or, it's not what I would do, but I understand why you would do that with that population, stuff like that. I was like, good job, guys.
But a lot of the time in scenarios like that, it's the tangents and the offcuts that are maybe cued by someone countering their point is where you kind of get the gems, right? Like doing a prepared presentation is great, but you're going to give the information that that the 80 or 90% just kind of need. Like when someone can ask a specific question or get someone to justify or dig deeper, that's quite often where you're going to find the stuff you can't find anywhere else, right? That's where you're going to pick up those little gems of wisdom that if you don't write them down, you might never hear that comment or that remark ever again, right? And I think that's where maybe people lose the value in the in-person experiences, is that you get those, those round table examples where you can actually ask a specific question and maybe get more than one viewpoint that maybe allows you to make your own interpretation, but allows you to get information that you are never going to get somewhere else. And this specifically in the context that you asked it as well. And, as great as online learning and stuff has been for everyone, I'm sure, you can't replace that, in my opinion, because there's just no one will ever ask that question in that context ever again, if you know what I mean.
No. And that's something that I try to explain too, where there's a reason a lot of this stuff gets banned on YouTube alone. Like they will get taken down sometimes, and you'll never get in the weeds like you will, but you have no idea who you're sitting next to in the room. And you may meet somebody who can not only help your business, but can actually connect you to maybe the type of practitioner that you didn't know existed. And the reason for doing a lot of the roundtables, like say I see Dave Tate and I see Tom speak, cool. Which one resonates with me more? Well, if it's both, you'll have the ability to go to your table and your table, and then you rotate. So it provides a great experience. And then when we break for a panel, then some of the panelists can say, you know what? This came up at my roundtable several times. We should discuss that on the panel. Cool. So then I'll have that, because we'll have topics for the panels, which are pretty much the big hitters, but that will help just direct the conversation. And I'm sure there'll be tons of tangents, but you're never going to find that like on a Zoom call or, like one of the online virtual summits.
When I've tried to explain it to people for like seminars or summits or whatever, it's like, how many videos could you watch on the squat? How many articles, textbooks, but then how much would you value Dave looking at your squat in person now versus 100 hours of videos on squat? Do you know what I mean? That, to me, that's the difference. It's kind of hard to really pinpoint what it is, but it's having an expert answer your question for you specifically is something that you just can't recreate somewhere else. And especially with the way you're doing it, I feel there where the experts get the chance to take on board, like what are people interested in today? And then maybe being able to broach into that, it becomes more flexible and more applicable then to everyone that's there, as opposed to just being, we are talking about X for the next hour. take it or leave it.
Well, what I've always liked about the panel aspect is you have experts that may have different opinions, right? And that's based upon the bias of who they work with, right? So it can be different demographics. But one expert may ask another one a question that we may not even know to ask because we're not experts in that field, right? So it may poke a hole in what they're doing or it may support what they're doing. But that's the answers that I want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times it could be, one expert saying, Buck, I didn't think about that. That's a really good point. I need to go back and look into that. Or you're right, but here's why I don't. Right? And that's at a level you're not going to find anywhere.
No.
Right?
No.
Because you'd have to know what question to ask. And a lot of times you just don't. And that's obviously apparent of any seminar or any conference you go to, because before you close out your presentation, does anybody have any questions? Nobody ever.
No.
You got to ask it like 17 times, right? But then as soon as it's over, 10 people are rushing up because they just don't feel comfortable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where a round table allows that to be able to happen.
Huge. And I think that's a big value add for what people are there for, and just getting that interaction alone. It's like, it's different to see someone speak for an hour and then not want to ask questions and then have to find time to corner them because you're embarrassed, where it's like, I already know all the embarrassing things that people want to ask. So I'm just going to already have that premeditated with the topics for the panels for people there. And then it becomes a normalized conversation, because they're not going to get that interaction online, or even if you book a consult with somebody or something.
What do you
like
expect the hot topics to be this year?
Probably the same stuff with the AIs, which are highly debated. DHEA and pregnenolone are big ones. And a lot of that I learned from Dave Lee, who is a health coach based in Australia, who I've mentored under for 3 years. And this is another thing, is like, people get to meet the people I've mentored under, like Luke Lehman and Dave are the biggest ones for the past several years. Like this is the resource. When you guys ask me for resources, I've invested time and money with them to learn this stuff. And here they are right in front of you. You can ask them whatever they want. So I think that with the TRT route, the DHEA, the pregnenolone, and clomiphene and HCG, which are still very hot topics, and the AIs, and then just basics of like, well, what is the best protocol for me, but in an overall blanket term, I guess. With nutrition and fitness, I actually don't know. I don't know which, there seems to be just the same regurgitation of the same arguments over and over, and whether they're arguments or not is based on who's there and what they're talking about. And then with business stuff, I do have a few different business coaches that are going to be speaking. Bedros is one of them, Mark Coles, even Jay Ferrugia touches on a lot of business stuff as well. And there's always hot topics within that as to what is working right now in online coaching. How do you show up with social media? Like all those things. So it's really for any guy who's just interested in any of those topics can come to that. But we do get a fair amount of medical practitioners and strength coaches.
So what do you think it is about Silverback that obviously you've managed to grow it quite considerably in the last couple of years at a time when generally in-person seminars, in-person workshops in any nature are kind of dwindling due to the readily available online courses. So what do you think it is about Silverback, whether it's your marketing of it or how you set it up or whatever, that has allowed it to thrive at times when other similar events are maybe dropping off?
I think it's a unique niche. I think being positioned as a men's health event only is probably what makes it different. And then speaking from what the attendees have said, they're like, you just bring together a really good group of guys. Like the feedback last year was overwhelming from when people were like, I have guys trips planned from guys I met here. Like these guys, everyone's so awesome and down to earth. Like there's no assholes. Like I'm just like, that to me means everything, because they're like, that's a compliment to you, Allie, the type of people you bring together. And I'm like, I just want everyone to have fun. Like, that's how it started out. It was like, let's have a party with some men's health education attached to it. And it still kind of is that. But it's also like, I don't want this, medical conferences are so
Formal.
dry and like formal and all that. And I didn't want any of that. I was like, I want no podiums on our stage. I want any of my doctors, like Jordan Grant is from Texas. I was like, bro, wear your cowboy boots, wear your hat. I don't care. I want everyone to be themselves. So when you feel like you can show up as yourself and you don't have to position yourself a certain way, then you just make authentic relationships with other people.
So where is it being held? It's
in Phoenix, Arizona, November 15 and 16. And the VIP day is the 14th.
And how do people find out about it?
Silverbacksummit.com.
Very simple. Very simple. How do people find more about you? Or how can they find you?
Find me on IG at the Ali Gilbert, ALI. Slide in the DMs without dick pics, please.
We already covered that one.
We already covered that, but I answer all my own DMs and have tons of conversations. So if you are shy, please don't be shy, because there's nothing that's TMI in my world, and I do want to help people.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again for coming out. Tom, thanks for the assist again, and
thank
we're
you for
done.
having me.
We're done.
All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, 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 or here for more videos.